Chapter 2509. Boom. In an instant, the young man in the feathered robe was surrounded. He was completely blocked from all directions. Before long, he coughed up blood again and again. His hair was disheveled and his face was aghast. He used all his strength to attack, but he couldn't escape at all. Instead, he was suppressed and was in danger. What's going on? Is this the power of a peak 6th level emperor? The young man in the feathered robe was shocked and angry. He felt that everything in front of him was overturning his understanding. Oh no! In the distance, the white-haired old man's expression changed and he attacked immediately. Buzz! He withdrew an ancient and mottled black jade palace lantern, and it revolved in space before it flashed out like a torrent of flames that was gorgeous, resplendent, dazzling, and blazing. Its might was extraordinarily great as well, and it burned space to the point it warped and incinerated everything into ash. Even an ordinary Emperor Realm expert would be reduced to ashes if they came into contact with such a torrent of flames. Lin soon turned around with his dark eyes and used the abyssal sword cauldron to resist. Clang! The abyssal sword cauldron and the palace lantern collided, and the rain of fire kept colliding, splashing out a torrent of power that swept in all directions. So strong! The white-haired old man's pupils constricted, and his sleeves fluttered as he slapped towards Lin Sun. This blow was like a moving mountain, and it had the power to crush the universe. The surging power of the ancestor realm rushed through the 9 heavens and 10 earth. Lin Sun leaped forward and waved his fist to kill. His spirit, chi, and spirit were boiling, causing Lin Sun's momentum to become arrogant and disdainful. He was like a chaotic furnace that stirred up the wind and clouds in all directions. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the two had fought fiercely for dozens of times, causing the world to fall into a violent chaos, and signs of collapse and destruction could be seen everywhere. The white-haired old man's face was already livid and gloomy, and the shock in his eyes couldn't be concealed at all. He couldn't imagine how a peak 6th level emperor could cross 3 levels and fight against an ancestor realm expert like him. The worst thing was that as the battle continued, the white-haired old man also began to feel the pressure on his face, and there were signs of him being suppressed. Could it be that this child is a monster who defies the laws of nature and walked out of the eternal true world? Otherwise, why didn't I know of his existence before? The more the white-haired old man fought, the colder his heart became. Originally, when he and the young man in the feathered robe saw that Lin Sun was alone and only at the peak of the 6th level emperor realm, it was like they saw a sheep waiting to be slaughtered. Therefore, they did not hesitate to attack. Who would have thought that this was a wolf in sheep's clothing? Lin Sun, on the other hand, became braver and stronger as he fought. His fighting spirit was burning in his heart, and he felt extremely happy. Since he'd broken through and stepped into the lawless realm, it wasn't that he hadn't killed a progenitor realm figure, but most of the time, he'd relied on the combined might of his 5 great Tao physiques or the assistance of the passing restriction divine ability. It was the same for killing the Golden Flame Tharch Ancestor and the Tharch Ancestor beside Feng Xuanzhen. In this battle, it was the first time that Lin Sun suppressed an Emperor Ancestor with his own strength without the help of Forbidden Death or the power of the 5 Tao bodies. Although the opponent was still not the real ancestor of a Tao, Lin Sun was quite excited to be able to achieve such a record. "Help me!" Suddenly, a shrill and miserable cry resounded from afar. The white-haired old man trembled all over. When he looked up, his heart sank. The Emperor Ancestor realm existence of the youth in the feathered robe was beaten to death. He didn't even have a chance to escape. His body was smashed and his spirit was shattered. The miserable state of his death greatly stimulated the white-haired old man. Seeing that the 5 Tao bodies were surrounding him, the white-haired old man didn't dare to hesitate anymore. He suddenly bit the tip of his tongue and let out a hysterical roar. Tut! A bloody light burst out from his body. Vaguely, There seemed to be countless figures of gods rushing out from the bloody light. At this moment, Lin Sun didn't hesitate to move away and retreat far away. Boom! The terrifying bloody light hit the abyssal sword cauldron in front of Lin Sun, bursting out a boundless force that made the abyssal sword cauldron shake violently. Lin Sun staggered and was almost blown away. When the smoke and dust dispersed, the white-haired old man was no longer in the field. The scene of destruction between heaven and earth was shocking. Lin Sun let out a breath of turbid air and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Did he underestimate the ancestor realm? No, it was not. The reason was that even he didn't expect that the white-haired old man's desperate blow would be so powerful. If he hadn't dodged in time and resisted with the abyssal sword cauldron, he would have been seriously injured. Next time I meet such old monsters, I must not give them a chance to fight desperately. I should attack with the 5 Tao bodies together and finish the battle quickly and kill them with one blow. This battle made Lin Sun vigilant, but it also made him gain a lot. At least, he had tested that in the case of a head-on collision, he could kill an emperor ancestor with his own combat power. Of course, it was just an ordinary emperor ancestor. If he met a Tao ancestor, he could only avoid the sharp edge. In the distance, the 5 Tao bodies returned to Lin Sun's body after collecting the spoils. The spoils were very rich, but there were no special treasures. There were some eternal void source crystals, divine materials, elixirs, emperor treasures and other miscellaneous treasures. I have always been curious about the origin of your master. Can you tell me about it? Cyan Sparrow suddenly asked. Along the way, Cyan Sparrow witnessed Lin Sun's battle after battle. She saw Lin Sun use the forbidden death magic to kill his enemies. She saw the terror of his 5 Tao bodies and the mysteriousness and power of the abyssal sword cauldron. According to Cyan Sparrow's knowledge, there were not many Emperor Juing who could compare with Lin Sun in the immortal Emperor Yuan clan. At least no one in the 6th Heaven Emperor realm could compare with him. Of course, Cyan Sparrow knew that Lin Sun was not simple. Otherwise, her master Yuan Qingheng, a peerless figure, would not be inferior to Lin Sun in a head-on battle. But Cyan Sparrow still had many doubts in her heart, and these doubts had been suppressed in her heart for a long time. When the time is right, I will tell you, Lin Sun said casually. Cyan Sparrow rolled her eyes and said, even if you don't tell me, I can guess a thing or two. Although the master of Skirich of the Luo family disappeared mysteriously a long time ago, his power of the devouring abyss is very famous among the immortal emperor clans in the eternal world. She did not finish her words, but Lin Sun knew that Cyan Sparrow had seen through some of the truth. What else did you see? Lin Sun asked. Cyan Sparrow's eyes turned and she said, I am just very puzzled. You are clearly not a descendant of the Luo family, so how can you master the Luo family's innate power? Lin Sun glanced at Cyan Sparrow and asked, is it easy to recognize the power of the devouring abyss? Cyan Sparrow thought for a moment and said, that depends on the person. The master of Skirich has disappeared for too long. Even in the eternal world, only some old people who are from the same generation as the master of Skirich might be able to recognize this kind of innate power. Soon after, Cyan Sparrow laughed and said, so you are worried that your innate power will be seen through. Don't worry, even in the current eternal world, there are only a few people who can see through it, let alone in the colossal 1,000 battle domains. But you can see through it. Lin Sun's eyes were deep. Looks like your background is not as simple as that of a pet. Cyan Sparrow seemed to be embarrassed into anger. She widened her eyes and said, who told you that I am a pet? If it was not because Miss was worried that you would be frightened and did not allow me to reveal my identity, you would have been scared to death. Lin Sun laughed. He knew that Cyan Sparrow's words might have been exaggerated, but it was impossible for her to be as simple as an ordinary Cyan Sparrow. Why aren't you saying anything? Are you afraid? Don't worry, I am not interested in revealing your identity. If Miss did not ask me to show you the way, I would not have bothered to talk to you. Cyan Sparrow regained her arrogant look. Lin soon laughed and did not think much of it. No matter how extraordinary her background was, she was still just a bird. Why should he bother with her? Seeing that Lin soon did not speak, Cyan Sparrow said, as if she had not vented her anger, "Don't be complacent. The Emperor Ancestor that you killed is known as the Nine Realms Ancestor in the eternal true world. The Ancestor is the extreme. In other words, if they do not master a complete Great Way, they will be stuck at the 9th level of the Emperor Realm for the rest of their lives. Only the Ancestor of the One Tao can achieve immortality. There is a world of difference between the Ancestor of the One Tao and the Nine Realms Ancestor." However, Lin Sun was not annoyed at all. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully and said, "I see. If you had not told me, I would not have known about the Nine Realms Ancestor. Thank you for teaching me." Cyan Sparrow was startled. The indignation in her chest seemed to have been forcibly suppressed. She could not help but glare at Lin Sun fiercely. Then she retracted her gaze with a cold snort and used her beak to comb her feathers. She looked like she did not want to bother with Lin Sun anymore. Lin Sun smiled and walked towards the blood-red world in the distance with a happy heart. Of the two Emperor Ancestors, one had been killed and the other had fled in panic. However, Lin Sun had still reaped a great harvest. He had obtained 3 sovereign-level Nightmares Life Jewels. In total, he now had 5 Life Jewels. No wonder those 2 old fellows chose to rob them. Hunting sovereign-level nightmares can only depend on luck and are extremely difficult to find. Robbing them is much faster. Along the way, Lin Sun could not help but think about robbing them. I wonder where Wen Xiaoheng and his group are. Otherwise I could kill this fat sheep. As a descendant of the immortal Emperor clan, he must have a lot of money on him. Besides this, Lin Sun had always been puzzled. Why would Mi Wuya and Yen Euro follow Wen Xiaoheng? This was too abnormal. Cyan Sparrow, do you know why Wen Xiaoheng wants to enter the vast thousand battle domain? He clearly came from the eternal world. Even if he wants to return, there is no need for him to choose this bloody path of no return, right? Lin Sun could not help but ask. "For training," said Cyan Sparrow. Cyan Sparrow said, "The experts of the vast thousand worlds view the vast thousand battle domain as the only path to the eternal world. In the eyes of the great forces of the eternal world, the vast thousand battle domain is the best battlefield for training. Almost every once in a while, the immortal Emperor clans will send their disciples into the vast thousand battle domain to train. They view the dangers as whetstones and the experts of the vast thousand battle domain as targets." Chapter 25:10. After a pause, Cyan Sparrow continued, "When Xiaoheng should belong to this situation. When you gradually go deeper into the vast thousand battle domain, you will meet many immortal Emperor clansmen along the way. Some powerful characters are even stronger than you." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and said, "Now that you mention it, I really want to see it." Cyan Sparrow was stunned. As they conversed, Lin Sun had been traversing between heaven and earth. Along the way, he encountered blood-colored nightmares that appeared and disappeared mysteriously, frequently ambushing him. In the end, he directly crushed all of them. Unfortunately, he did not encounter a single monarch-level blood-colored nightmare along the way. This made Lin Sun speechless. Had all these monsters been hunted down? Suddenly, there was an air-rending sound in the distance. A group of Emperor Realm figures appeared, like a storm sweeping across the heaven and earth. When they saw Lin Sun walking alone, these Emperor Realm experts were startled, their pupils unnoticeably narrowing. Lin Sun also stopped, his black eyes clear and deep. The atmosphere was tense. But in the end, the golden-robed man at the front waved his hand and led the group of people away. These fellows are quite smart. Lin Sun could not help but feel a little disappointed. If they encountered a great calamity, at least they could take advantage of others and perhaps gather enough jewels of life. But this situation did not happen. Not long after the golden-robed man and his group left, one of them could not help but say, "Previously, that guy was alone. With our strength, we can suppress him. Even if we do not kill him, we can force him to obediently hand over his jewels of life." Obviously, this person was not resigned. How can someone who dares to walk alone in the ancient nightmare battlefield be an ordinary person? He is at least a peerless great emperor. This kind of tough bone is not easy to chew. The golden-robed man said casually. But you are also a peerless great emperor. With so many of us, if we attack together, we will definitely win. In my opinion, why don't we test him? If his cultivation is really terrifying, we can just retreat in a hurry. Many people spoke up. The golden-robed man stopped in his tracks, hesitating. Jewels of life were too difficult to find. In this ancient nightmare battlefield, there were countless people moving around. One could imagine how difficult it was to gather enough jewels of life. Forget it. Let's test him. If something goes wrong, we'll retreat immediately. The golden-robed man gritted his teeth and made his decision. Everyone's spirits rose. Immediately, they followed the golden-robed man and chased after Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't go far. When he noticed that the golden-robed man and his companions had returned, he was stunned at first, and then the disappointment in his heart was swept away, and he felt quite happy. Obviously, these fellows were unwilling to accept this outcome. That's good. He suddenly turned around and glanced at the golden-robed man and the others, saying, "You want the power jewels?" The golden-robed man and the others stared blankly, their expressions strange. This fellow was quite smart. "I wonder if fellow Taoist is willing to part with it?" the golden-robed man asked. Others all looked at Lin Sun with cold eyes and didn't hide their excitement at all. Lin Sun immediately laughed. "It just so happens that I also need beads of life. Seeing that so many of you are working together, you should have collected a lot of beads of life, right?" What was going on? Those people were a little confused. This guy couldn't be thinking of robbing them all by himself, right? The golden-robed man felt a little uneasy. He coughed and said, "Fellow Taoism, why don't we have a fight? Whoever loses has to hand over his power jewels." Lin Sun agreed without hesitation, "Sure." Seeing that she was still so calm and composed while being besieged, and even faintly seemed to be eager to give it a try, the golden-robed man felt that something was wrong. At this moment, suddenly, there was a sound of something breaking through the air in the distance. Another group of people appeared at an extremely fast speed. They were led by a black-armored man with a black spear on his back, surrounded by black mist. It was the Jade Star Ju-Di. The golden-robed man and the others were slightly alarmed when they saw the Jade Star Ju-Di leading a group of emperors. To Lin Sun and the golden-robed man's surprise, as soon as they arrived, the Jade Star Ju-Di waved her hand and gave an order. "Kill these guys and take their power jewels. Remember, don't hurt Ling Xuanzi. After all, he is one of us." His words were sonorous, powerful, and full of murderous intent. Boom! As he spoke, the Jade Star Ju-Di had already made his move. A black spear pierced through the air like lightning and murderous wind. The corner of Lin Sun's mouth twitched. One of them? He was clearly trying to steal his prey. So they are one of us. Let's go. The golden-robed man's expression changed drastically. He shouted and led the others to flee. The Jade Star Ju-Di and the others chased after them without hesitation. The Jade Star Ju-Di's voice came from afar. "Ling Xuanzi, remember this. You owe me a favor this time." Lin Sun's face darkened a little. "Did I ask you to help? You stole my prey and now you want me to owe you a favor? Women are really unreasonable." After thinking about it, Lin Sun gave up the idea of chasing after them. There was no other way. Even if he chased after them, he would not get any benefit. Lin Sun shook his head and continued forward. On the way, Cyan Sparrow could not help but point out, every month, a group of Emperor Realm practitioners will enter the vast 1,000 battlefields. Each group needs to enter the ancient nightmare battlefield. No matter how many monarch-level nightmares there are, they are not enough to kill. This means that if you want to collect 10 beads of life in a short time, you can only rob and fight. Lin Sun had already thought this through. He said, "Everyone's nature and Taoist heart are different. At least when there is no grievance between us, I will not rob others." Cyan Sparrow looked at Lin Sun with surprise and said, "You are very different from some of the great emperors I have seen. How many people who controlled the supreme power could keep their hearts in order to achieve their goals? In fact, the higher one's cultivation was, the more unscrupulous they would be." Very few people acted like Lin Sun. Several hours later, the sound of a fierce battle came from afar. Lin Sun spread out his divine sense and saw a group of Emperor Realm practitioners besieging a black-robed man in a very distant place. The black-robed man was already riddled with injuries and was bathed in blood. He could not hold on any longer. On the other hand, the group of Emperor Realm practitioners besieging him had a shocking lineup. The leader was a great emperor and there were 2 Realm 9 ancestors supporting them. "Fellow Taoist, save me. I am willing to hand over my bead of life to thank you." Suddenly, the black-robed man noticed Lin Sun and shouted anxiously. At the same time, the group of Emperor Realm practitioners also noticed Lin Sun. Seeing that he was alone, they could not help but show disdain. Lin Sun was indeed a little tempted. However, before he could react, a cold shout was heard, "This guy can't hold on any longer. Go and kill that person and take his bead of life." The one who spoke was the leader of the great emperors. He was a tall man bathed in golden divine light. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and he looked disdainful and cold. Yes. Instantly, the 2 Realm 9 ancestors and the group of Emperor Realm practitioners turned around and fixed their eyes on Lin Sun. Their expressions were full of ridicule and playfulness. Whoosh! Their figures flickered and they besieged Lin Sun. Lin Sun thought that he was just passing by and had no grievances with them. But it was obvious that it was useless to say this now. These guys obviously did not intend to let him go in order to snatch his bead of life. "Do you see? Others do what you don't want to do without any hesitation," Green Sparrow sighed softly. "Isn't this better? At least when I kill them, I don't have to be polite at all." Lin Sun laughed. Boom! Without any nonsense, the battle broke out directly. The 2 Realm 9 ancestors took the lead and rushed over. They took out their treasures and displayed their Taoist method. Since Lin Sun said he wouldn't be polite, he naturally wouldn't be polite. Then, his figure flashed and the 5 Taoist bodies rushed out together. Together with Lin Sun himself, they activated the abyssal sword cauldron and attacked one of the Realm 9 ancestors. Boom! The world was turned upside down and the void was in disorder. In the blink of an eye, the Realm 9 ancestor who was targeted by Lin Sun had no time to resist, and his treasures were blown away by Lin Sun himself. His defense was broken, and the 5 Taoist bodies took the opportunity to attack him. After a series of crazy attacks, the Realm 9 ancestor was directly killed on the spot. His flesh and spirit were all blown up and turned into ashes. It was a brutal mess. Oh no! The other Realm 9 ancestor's face changed, and his soul almost came out of his body. He realized that he had encountered an extremely terrifying opponent this time. But Lin Sun didn't give him a chance to escape at all. Lin Sun and the 5 Taoist bodies rushed forward together like the gods on an expedition, rumbling and rolling over. Their power was like an invincible force that would sweep the world. Bang! In just a few seconds, the 2nd Realm 9 ancestor was also blown up, and his death was the same as the first one. Both of them were killed by Lin Sun and his doppelgangers with crushing power before they could exert their full strength. These 2 troublesome old things were killed. Lin Sun left the 5 doppelgangers to deal with the emperors who had long been frightened and fled in panic, and he himself went to kill the tall man in the distance. At this time, the tall man was also scared. His head was in a daze, and he could not believe his eyes. What was going on? Ever since he started cultivating, he had never seen a peak 6th level Great Emperor kill 2 9th level Great Ancestors in just a few breaths of time. Was he still a human? Seeing Lin Sun's true body coming, the tall man did not have time to think more. The golden light on his body burst out, and he suddenly moved the void and fled to the distance. After a few flashes, he disappeared without a trace. Lin Sun could not help but be stunned by the speed of his escape. Immediately, he shook his head and looked at the injured black-robed man and said, "It's time to fulfill your promise." The black-robed man looked gloomy and gasped, "My fellow Taoist, you were not trying to save me, but to protect yourself. This promise cannot be counted." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows, and his dark eyes were deep. "Aren't you afraid that I will kill you and take your treasure?" The black-robed man was stiff all over, and he forced a smile. "I think you are upright, and you will not do such a despicable thing, right?" Lin Sun laughed, and his answer was very simple. He slapped the black-robed man. Chapter 25:11. Bang! The black-robed man, who was already heavily injured, immediately fainted after the slap landed on his body. Lin Sun searched the man's storage treasures and found 2 beads of life. As for the other treasures, he did not touch them and threw them back. He went back on his word. "Why didn't you kill him? Instead, you only took 2 beads of life?" Cyan Sparrow was stunned. "How long do you think he can survive in the ancient nightmare battlefield with such injuries?" Lin Sun said, "As for only taking 2 beads of life, well, this is called keeping one's word." Then, he looked into the distance. With the appearance of the 5 Tao bodies, the group of martial emperors who had lost the 2 realm 9 ancestors were almost completely annihilated. In the end, only 2 of them took advantage of the chaos to escape with their lives. After cleaning up the battlefield, Lin Sun obtained a lot of miscellaneous treasures and 3 beads of life, all of which came from one of the 9th realm ancestors. So far, Lin Sun not only collected 10 beads of life, but also had 2 left. He reached out his hand and the 10 beads of life appeared in the void. After a little refining, they turned into a blood-red spiritual ring with thunder and evil spirit. This was the Thunder Spirit Ring. Wearing it on his body, Lin Sun immediately felt that there was a wonderful echo between the blood-killing hard thunder and the Thunder Spirit Ring. One Thunder Spirit Ring can support 10 people to act together. "You are so extravagant to enjoy the Thunder Spirit Ring alone," Cyan Sparrow teased. "Are you a human?" Lin Sun suddenly asked. Cyan Sparrow was stunned by this question. She did not speak for a long time. Lin Sun smiled and no longer hesitated. He flashed and flew up to the sky. Thunder and evil spirit roared in the sky, like a canopy, covering the ancient nightmare battlefield. When Lin Sun approached, the thunder and evil spirit spread to both sides, forming a path leading to the sky. Lin Sun was refreshed and flew over. When he passed through the canopy, Lin Sun felt as if he had passed through a barrier of the world and had the illusion of the stars moving. The next moment, he had appeared in a dark starry sky. The gray specter energy was like a large mist that enveloped this expanse of the starry sky, and it emanated a cold, oppressive, and suffocating aura. Piece after piece of broken land floated in the grayish-white mist. They were faintly discernible, and there was no end in sight. Woo 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 from time to time, waves of sorrowful and resentful voices would resound from the depths of the starry sky. They were indistinct, and when one tried to capture them carefully, one would be unable to determine the source of the voices. This is the Spectre Soul Domain. Buried within it is the great Tao ancestral source energy of the last epoch. The Green Sparrow guided. In the countless years of the past, even though countless experts have entered this place, the grand Tao ancestral root here hasn't dried up. Conversely, a grand Tao ancestral root will emerge from time to time. So, you don't have to worry about being unable to find such a fortuitous encounter. What you should be worried about the most is how to resist battle and plunder. In addition, there is a kind of ferocious soul in the spectre soul domain, which is called the spectre. It is said that after the destruction of the last epoch, it is transformed from the obsessions left by some extremely powerful existences. The undead monarch is the most terrifying. Even the weakest among them is at the 7th level of the Emperor realm. Their bodies are filled with a strange obsession that can stealthily invade a cultivator's state of mind. Even if it's a 9th level ancestor, once their state of mind is contaminated by this obsession, they will go crazy. There have been many such examples in the past years. As for the general spectre, they are not very powerful. They aren't that powerful, but you can't be careless. Since ancient times, there have been many emperors who have been hunted down and killed by the specters. Knowing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel awestruck. He asked, "How to find the Grand Tao ancestral source?" "Try your luck," Cyan Sparrow said. "Remember, every expert who enters the Revenant Soul domain only has a month's time. If they don't leave this place after a month, they will be killed by the Revenant Storm. At the very least, no one in the Emperor realm will survive." Spectre Storm. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. After a while, his figure flickered and swept towards the depths of the cold starry sky covered with grey mist. In the starry sky, there were broken pieces of land floating. Some of them were only more than 300 meters wide, and some were thousands of miles away. Most of the land was full of potholes, barren and barren. Some land was branded with sword holes, axe marks and mottled relics, exuding a desolate and heavy atmosphere. Obviously, those were the traces left by the world-shaking war, which had survived the erosion of time to this day. Suddenly, an illusory figure flashed out from the grayish-white mist, and it was soundless and didn't make the slightest sound. Upon closer inspection, this figure seemed very blurry. Wisps of undead chi permeated the air, making it impossible to make out its appearance. It was like a ghost, filled with a strange aura. Whoosh! The smoke rolled, and the figure rushed towards Lin Sun. He made a mudra with both hands and slapped at Lin Sun. The palm print was ghastly, and the power released was extremely strange. It was grey and boundless, like the light of hell. The spectre spirit. Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and the brilliant Taoist light whistled out. In the roar, the figure of the spectre spirit was directly shattered and turned into wisps of grey mist. A strange scene appeared. The wisps of grey mist seemed to be alive. Hundreds and thousands of them tore the sky and shot towards Lin Sun. It was incredibly fast. Bang, 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 a burst of dense explosions sounded. The Taoist light flowed around Lin Sun, crushing the wisps of grey mist into powder. This power should be the obsession left by the strongest of the last era. Although it is not terrible, it is extremely strange. "I can't touch it," Lin Sun understood. He continued to move forward and search. The realm of the spectre spirit was extremely vast. According to Cyan Sparrow, it was no different from a small world. Along the way, Lin Sun had yet to find the great Tao ancestral root. Instead, he was ambushed by many ghouls. Some were strong and some were weak. The stronger ones were comparable to a 6th-level emperor, while the weaker ones were at the 3rd-level emperor realm. These couldn't threaten Lin Sun. But he didn't dare to be careless. After each spectre died, it would turn into a strange power of obsession and try to invade his body. This kind of power was extremely vicious and treacherous. Lin Sun had to be on the alert for fear of being contaminated. Just like this, they searched for around 2 hours. Even though they'd encountered many specters, they didn't encounter any other cultivators. This made Lin Sun realize that even if he was not the first to enter the realm of the spectre spirit, he would definitely not be far behind. Before long, his eyes were suddenly attracted by a floating land. The land was about dozens of miles in size. In the center of the land there was a naturally formed huge ravine. The ravine was filled with thick gray mist, making it impossible to see what was inside. But in Lin Sun's spiritual awareness, he was keenly aware that there was a magnificent and colorful halo looming in the depths of the ravine, which was difficult to be found. Immediately, Lin Sun moved across the void and arrived above the ravine in a flash, looking down. This time, he used the third eye connection. Immediately, he saw through the mist and found that the ravine was thousands of meters deep, which was no different from an abyss. At the bottom of the ravine, there was a colorful halo, bright and dazzling, like a small burning sun, releasing a strange power of the Great Way. The Great Way ancestral source. Lin Sun's eyes lit up. Although he had never seen such a divine object, he could roughly judge it. Taking a deep breath, he rushed down the ravine. The thick grayish-white mist began to tumble violently, and the silhouettes of the dead swept out one after another. They were densely packed and constantly rushed out. Lin soon noticed that there were many caves on both sides of the ravine, like a beehive, from which the figures of the specters rushed out. With no time to think, he activated the abyssal sword cauldron and rushed down the ravine. Boom! A fierce battle broke out. The specters seemed to be unafraid of death, and their strength was between the 3rd and 6th level of the Emperor Realm. If it were an ordinary Emperor Realm cultivator, he would have already retreated and fled. But Lin Sun was like a hot knife through butter, crushing all the way. Wherever he passed, the figures of the specters exploded one after another, turning into strange obsessions and continuing to chase after him. But in the end, they were destroyed one by one, unable to hurt Lin Sun at all. To Lin Sun's surprise, there were countless specters under the ravine, as if he had intruded into their home. He didn't flinch and continued to rush forward. No matter how many specters there were, they were not a big threat to him. As Lin Sun's figure was about to reach the bottom of the ravine, suddenly, a strange cold and terrifying force swept across and locked on Lin Sun. Boom! From the bottom of the ravine, a figure as black as ink suddenly rushed out, wearing a Taoist robe condensed by the breath of the specters. His hair was coiled into a bun, and he held a Taoist sword in his hand. He looked thin, like a Taoist. But whether it was the Taoist robe, Taoist sword, or even the bun, they were all transformed by the breath of the specters. Especially the pair of eyes, like a pair of black vortexes, flashing a strange hollow luster. This was a king of the specters. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed slightly. Whoosh! After the Taoist rushed out, the Taoist sword in his hand chopped from bottom to top. The strange black sword chi tore the void, releasing a horrible and unparalleled sword intent. That kind of aura had the demeanor of an 8th-level sword emperor. It was just that the sword will was incomparably strange and made people shudder. Without hesitation, Lin Sun fought against it with abyssal sword cauldron. Bang! The strange black sword chi exploded. At the same time, abyssal Taoist sword rushed out with a buzz, bursting out brilliant sword chi and covering the specters. Rumble! The rolling mist was annihilated, and the void seemed to collapse and explode. The king of the specters was directly chopped into pieces and turned into rolling black light rain. The terrible thing was that the black light rain didn't dissipate. Instead, it condensed into a strange sword chi covered with strange Taoist patterns and disappeared in an instant. Lin Sun's face changed slightly. Abyssal sword cauldron suddenly shone brightly and blocked in front of him. Boom! A deafening collision resounded, and the strand of sword chi that was covered in strange markings was blocked by the sword cauldron by a hair's breadth before shattering inch by inch. But the power released from the shattered sword chi made Lin Sun's blood boil. His figure shook and he was almost shaken back. Chapter 25:12. The sword chi that was covered in the strange Tao patterns finally dissipated. Lin Sun breathed a sigh of relief and was surprised. He didn't take Cyan Sparrow's advice seriously before. But after killing a king of the undead, he realized how terrible such a ferocious soul was. Who could imagine that the obsession of the king of the undead was actually a sword chi? Moreover, it was so strange and covered in obscure and strange Tao markings. Suddenly, Lin Sun noticed that the king of the undead left an old broken jade slip, which had been modeled for a long time. Lin Sun put it away and explored it with his spiritual awareness. Father, Mother said that you are coming back soon. Is it true? Mother and I miss you very much. You have been away for 319 years and 87 days. Father, I must wait for you to come back to attend my wedding banquet. If you don't come back, I won't get married. The words in the jade slip were intermittent and extremely vague. Lin Sun finally saw 2 complete sentences. Then, Lin Sun fell into silence. His heartstrings seemed to be plucked by an inexplicable force and trembled slightly. He thought that since this incomplete jade slip was the only thing on the king of the undead, it must contain a big secret. Who would have thought it was a letter from home? A letter full of his daughter's deep yearning. She even remembered clearly how long her father had been away. That was a trivial thing that only close relatives would remember. And the king of the undead should also miss his daughter very much when he was alive. Lin Sun couldn't help thinking of Zhao Jingxian and Lin Fan, who stayed in Heart-Cleansing Peak. Although they were separated for only more than a year, they must have been missing him all the time. Immediately, Lin Sun smiled. Lin Fan certainly wouldn't think too much. Young people didn't know the feeling of sorrow. But Jing Xian, she must have thought of him more than once already. Thinking of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh softly. He carefully put away the old and mottled jade slip in his hand. Such an item was very common, but it was precious and worth collecting. Lin Sun didn't regret killing the king of the undead. Because the king of the undead was just a ferocious soul formed by obsession, and its original body might have already died in the destruction of the last era. No matter how many eras change, or how the affairs of the world change, familial love will never change. Lin Sun murmured in his heart. With the fall of the undead monarch, the undead in the ravine seemed to have realized the danger and disappeared into the boundless fog, never to be found again. Lin Sun calmed down and looked at the bottom of the ravine. A brilliant halo the size of a fan floated above the dark brown ground, sprinkling a magnificent light of the way. When he walked closer, the ball of light surged with strange and pure ancestral root energy, and strands of the aura of the Grand Tao suffused it, causing it to be extremely dazzling. Cyan Sparrow leaped onto Lin Sun's shoulder and clicked her tongue in wonder. "You're really lucky. Based on the appearance of this ancestral root of the Great Way, it can already be classified as first-rate. In the past, once such an ancestral root appeared, it was bound to cause a large-scale bloody battle." When she saw Lin Sun walk forward with the intention of making a move to take away the ancestral Tao root, the Azure Sparrow hurriedly reminded him. "This divine treasure was left behind from the last era, and it can't be taken away. Once it's used forcefully, its energy will instantly be exhausted." Lin Sun stopped and asked, "What should I do?" "Meditate at its side and refine it," said Cyan Sparrow. Lin Sun thought for a moment before he flicked his sleeve and set up the 9th Hell God Cage formation in the surroundings. After that, he sat cross-legged at the side of the Grand Tao ancestral root and meditated with concentration. As he breathed in and out, the light rain of the Great Way gushing out from the Great Way ancestral source seemed to be drawn, turning into wisps of light flowing into Lin Sun's mouth and nose. When they entered Lin Sun's body, they suddenly turned into a surging torrent of heat and spread out with a loud bang. At this moment, Lin Sun's pores, meridians, acupoints, internal organs, limbs, every inch of his body burst out with a rhythm of hunger and thirst, like countless small mouths waiting to be fed, cheering with eagerness and joy. Even his imperial world emanated an unprecedentedly strong rhythm, and it rumbled and seethed. When the scorching torrent formed from the chi of the Grand Tao ancestral root was ceaselessly absorbed by his body, Lin Sun felt comfortable to the point he almost couldn't restrain himself from moaning. This feeling was truly too miraculous. It was like eating a sumptuous and tempting feast after starving for a long time, or like a desert that welcomed a heavy rain after a long time of drought. Lin Sun had never experienced such a wonderful feeling when he cultivated in the past. The energy of the Grand Tao ancestral root that was buried here from the last era could undoubtedly be said to be miraculous. 4 hours later, the ball of Grand Tao ancestral root had shrunk to the size of an infant's fist. On the other hand, Lin Sun clearly sensed that his cultivation had risen explosively by a great deal, and he'd already stepped into the intermediate stage from the initial stage of the 6th level of the Emperor realm. The changes were so great that Lin Sun couldn't help but exclaim with admiration. There were 9 levels of the Emperor realm, and every level was like a natural chasm. The higher one's cultivation was, the more difficult it was to advance. Even if it was a figure with extraordinary natural talent, the speed at which they broke through would gradually slow down along with the increase in their cultivation. As for ordinary cultivators, whether they were able to break through was still a problem. Yet now, in a short period of 4 hours, his cultivation had undergone such a great change, so how could Lin Sun not be surprised? After all, his foundation was peerlessly solid, and it far exceeded ordinary cultivators at the same cultivation realm. It was even to the extent that it was matchless amongst extreme Emperor realm cultivators. Being able to advance from the initial stage to the intermediate stage of the Grand Tao ancestral root could be said to be extremely swift. No wonder all the experts that entered the Spectre Soul domain in the past didn't hesitate to fight each other for the sake of seizing the Grand Tao ancestral root. Such a treasure is truly too unbelievable. Lin Sun quickly discarded his distracting thoughts and continued cultivating. 2 hours later, the ball of Grand Tao ancestral root had been completely refined, whereas Lin Sun's cultivation had started to advance towards the advanced stage of the 6th level of the Emperor realm. As he sensed the changes in his body, Lin Sun was completely tempted. 1 month. If I make the best use of my time, then perhaps it would be sufficient to allow my cultivation to step onto a new level. Lin Sun muttered. You were lucky this time to possess a Grand Tao ancestral root of top quality. You might not be so lucky next time. The green sparrow spoke and poured cold water on Lin Sun. Lin Sun smiled and remained indifferent. His figure flickered as he flashed towards the outside of the ravine, and he continued to search along the cold and desolate starry sky that was suffused with mist. You're really a jinx. Half a day later, Lin Sun sighed. He actually didn't find any Grand Tao ancestral root along the way, but he'd hunted many specters instead. You're blaming me for your bad luck? The green sparrow glared at him. Right at this moment, a ferocious roar suddenly sounded from afar, and it revealed a tyrannical and insane aura. The green sparrow immediately said, Someone's mind has been invaded by the obsession of the specters. If nothing unexpected happens, the person's mind is in disorder and has fallen into madness. Lin Sun's divine sense spread out, and he vaguely captured the sounds of battle. The battle that occurred in the Spectre Soul domain was bound to be related to the fight for the Grand Tao ancestral root. Come, let's go take a look. Lin Sun's figure flashed as he moved through the starry sky. After experiencing the miraculousness of the Grand Tao ancestral root, how could he miss any opportunity to fight for it? Greed makes people go crazy. The green sparrow sighed. What greed? This is called the Great Way Race. The Grand Tao ancestral root is originally ownerless. Others can rob it, so why can't I rob it? Lin Sun said and quickened his pace. Soon, an extremely vast floating land appeared. A chaotic battle was taking place in it. The figures of the Emperor realm flashed in it, and each of them showed monstrous power. Sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, tridents, Taoist seals, and precious bottles. All kinds of emperor weapons wrapped in dazzling and terrifying power crisscrossed each other. The rolling roar was like thunder, mixed with all kinds of fighting sounds, roars, screams, and wails. This was indeed a big chaotic battle. At a glance, Lin Sun saw at least 4 or 5 groups of Emperor realm from different camps were fighting, and the surging and spreading aftermath of the battle could destroy the world. Not far from the battlefield, there was a huge space whirlpool, which seemed to be stagnant, floating there quietly. In the depths of the whirlpool, there was a magnificent rain of light from time to time. Obviously, it was the breath of the grand Tao ancestral root, and it was extraordinary. And this chaotic battle was naturally triggered by the fight for the grand Tao ancestral root. Lin Sun suddenly noticed that there were many hidden auras around this floating land, and they were paying attention to the battlefield, waiting for an opportunity to make a move. When he saw this scene, Lin Sun immediately determined that it wouldn't be so easy to take possession of the ancestral Tao root for himself. Too many opponents were eyeing it covetously. Lin Sun thought for a moment and also concealed his aura, stopping in a gray mist not far from the floating land. Retreat. In the chaotic battle, some Emperor Realm figures sensed that they had no chance of winning, and decisively retreated. There were also some who sensed that there were more hidden opponents in the area near the land. Realizing that the situation was not good, they decided to protect themselves first. But there were still some people fighting and killing, and the situation was tragic. Most of them were overseen by top figures, and they were full of confidence. Lin Sun looked around, and found that most of the figures in the battlefield were unfamiliar. They should be cultivators who entered the boundless thousand battle domain from other realm gate. Only Mutian and the others were familiar to Lin Sun. It seems that as time passes, more and more experts from the ancient nightmare battlefield have entered the revenant soul realm. Lin Sun frowned. This also meant that there would be more and more opponents in the fight for the Grand Tao ancestral root. The most troublesome thing was that the Grand Tao ancestral root could not be taken away, and could only be refined on the spot. Even if they seized the initiative, they would not have much chance to refine it once the enemies came. Get out of the way. Just as Lin Sun was thinking, an indifferent and cold voice suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. A group of figures flew over from afar, and their auras were not concealed at all, and they came straight to the floating land. The group of experts hiding in the dark, and the experts who were fighting in the chaotic battle, could not help but reveal vigilant and fearful expressions. This was because the leader of this group of people was one of the 5 ultimate emperors from the immortal emperor clan, the One Clan. One Xiaoheng. Literature Hall. Chapter 25:13. As Wen Xiaoheng's group arrived, the chaotic battle on the floating continent came to an end. Wen Xiaoheng. He was from the immortal emperor clan. Just this identity alone was enough to make the emperors from the vast thousand domains fearful. It's this guy, Lin Sun, who was in the dark, was first stunned, then he revealed a playful expression. Others might be afraid of Wen Xiaoheng's identity, but Lin Sun didn't care at all. In addition, he had already shed all pretense of cordiality with Wen Xiaoheng in the City of Punishment. In Lin Sun's heart, Wen Xiaoheng had long regarded Wen Xiaoheng as an enemy. At this moment, everyone was silent, and everyone was looking at him with fear. The corners of Wen Xiaoheng's mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. It was a type of reserved and undisguised arrogance. You can all leave now. I want this ancestral root of the Great Path, he said casually, intending to monopolize the opportunity that everyone had been fighting for a long time. The faces of the emperors nearby darkened, especially those who were fighting on the continent. It was especially so for the people who were fighting on the land. No matter which camp they were from, they were all furious. Humph! Didn't you hear what my young master said? The old woman next to Wen Xiaoheng snorted. 3 breaths. If you don't leave by then, you'll bear the consequences. Her voice spread across the entire area. Let's go. A group of emperors immediately left with gloomy faces. Following them, the rest of the people present left one after another. Even the top figures like Mutian didn't dare to voice their anger and chose to leave. This scene made Lin Sun realize how terrifying the immortal emperor clan was. It was a formless deterrent that was enough to make the peerless figures of the vast thousand domains lower their heads and swallow their anger. and those who are hiding in the dark, don't blame me for being impolite if you don't leave now." The old woman's eyes were like lightning as she scanned the area around the floating continent. Very quickly, some of the emperors who were watching in the dark sighed and turned to leave. With the one clan here, who would have the guts to steal it? There were also people who couldn't help but speak out in anger. The vast thousand battles domain isn't the one clan's territory. Aren't you being too overbearing? Her words made Wen Xiaoheng frown. The old woman had already charged out at the first moment. She moved through the void and smashed the jade bamboo stick in her hand in a certain direction. Rumble! The jade green light descended like a waterfall, smashing the entire area into chaos. One of the emperors staggered back, his expression changing. He turned around to flee, but it was too late. Bang! As the old woman stepped forward, the bamboo cane in her hand lightly tapped the air. A ray of green light shot out and pierced through the emperor's head, creating a ghastly bloody hole. After that, his entire body rustled as he transformed into ash that drifted into the air, and he was obliterated in both body and soul. The emperors who had yet to leave couldn't help but gasp in horror at this terrifying scene. He's only at the 7th level emperor realm. It's already a stroke of luck for him to make it into the spectral realm alive. Why did he have to die? The old woman sneered, her face filled with disdain. In a flash, she returned to Wen Xiaoheng's side. Although this old thing isn't the ancestor of a Dao, he isn't someone an ordinary 9th realm ancestor can compare to. His cultivation has probably reached the perfected 9th level emperor realm. He only needs to grasp a complete great Dao to achieve the transformation of the ancestor of a Dao. Lin soon narrowed his eyes. Although the old woman was arrogant and domineering, he had to admit that she was a thorny problem. Her beauty was enough to intimidate many peak emperors. With the protection of an expert like the old woman, coupled with the fact that he was from the immortal emperor clan, Wen Xiaoheng couldn't be blamed for daring to monopolize the great Dao ancestral root. Gradually, almost all the great emperors around the floating continent left. To them, this wasn't the only place in the spectral realm where the great Dao ancestral root was born. There was no need to offend Wen Xiaoheng's group. Seeing that there were no more obstacles, Wen Xiaoheng ordered, "Granny, you guys guard here. I'll go refine the great Dao ancestral root." "Yes." The old woman replied respectfully and stayed on the scene with the others. As for Wen Xiaoheng, he walked straight into the whirlpool not far away. It was also at this moment, a sharp whistle that sounded like wind and thunder suddenly resounded, causing the heavens and the earth to wail. The old woman's face sank. She saw a sharp and dazzling divine arrow tear through the sky and explode towards her at an unbelievable speed. Everywhere it passed, the void exploded and shockwaves spread out. The old woman waved the jasper bamboo staff and created a jade-green screen of light. Countless profound great Dao energy filled it. Bang! An earth-shattering sound of collision resounded. Although the arrow was blocked, the jade-green screen of light shattered. The old woman had no choice but to wave the bamboo staff again in order to dispel the terrifying torrent of energy. "You're courting death." A cold light circulated in the old woman's eyes. She didn't expect that someone would dare to attack them despite knowing who they were. They were simply tired of living. In an instant, she caught sight of the enemy's tracks. She couldn't help but be stunned. Then, she revealed a hideous smile. "Little thing, we haven't even settled the score with you, but you've actually delivered yourself to our doorstep." At the same time, Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro, who had been following Wen Xiaoheng all the way, were shocked. They revealed looks of disbelief. Lin Sun. They almost couldn't believe their eyes. The one who attacked was naturally Lin Sun. At this moment, he was holding the insignificant bow and standing in the gray mist not far from the floating land. The arrow just now was also shot by him. Seeing that the arrow was blocked, he turned around and rushed into the distance. "You guard here, I'll go kill that bastard," the old woman said, took a step, and her figure suddenly disappeared. How could he be so stupid? Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro's hearts tightened. How could they offend the people of the One family? Why are you two so nervous? Are you worried that Granny Shui is not that bastard's opponent? A black-robed man next to Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro glanced at them and snorted coldly. Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro both lowered their heads. The other silver-robed woman said unhurriedly, "Don't make it difficult for them." The young master said that the natural endowments of these two people can be considered to be at the top ranks of the universe, and they'll be able to become the most loyal servants with a little fostering. The black-robed man laughed. Just thinking about it makes people sigh. In the vast thousand worlds, what's the point of having good aptitude? In the future, he would only be a slave. Of course, being able to become a servant of our one clan is also a great fortune that everyone in the world yearns for. Everyone nearby laughed. Suddenly, someone cried out in alarm and pointed into the distance. Why is he back? Where is Granny Shui? Everyone looked up and saw a tall figure emerging in the distance. It was Lin Sun. This scene caused everyone to be shocked. What was going on? Didn't Granny Shui chase after this person? Even Mi Wuya and Soft Mist were stunned. They were dumbfounded. Yin Huang, come with me to kill this kid. The rest of you guard this place. Remember to absolutely not allow the young master to be disturbed. The black-robed man gave the order and rushed to Lin Sun with the silver-robed woman called Yin Huang. However, Lin Sun turned around and left. In next to no time, he, the dark-robed man, and the silver-robed woman's figures had vanished. The atmosphere on the floating continent had become much more serious. The great emperors from the One clan had all become vigilant. But not long after, someone cried out involuntarily, "Why is he here again?" Everyone looked up and saw another figure of Lin Sun appear in the void in the distance, causing them to stare blankly. They were certain that it was not an illusion technique but a doppelganger of the Great Path displayed by a secret method. At the thought of this, they all had a bad feeling. Now that Granny Shui, the black-robed man, and the silver-robed woman had all been lured away, there were only 7 great emperors present, including Mi Wuya and Soft Mist. We can't be fooled again. Guard this place together and wait for Granny Shui and the others to return. One person made a prompt decision and gave the order. Everyone nodded in unison, also aware of the treacherous situation. But to their surprise, as soon as Lin Sun appeared, he directly teleported into the void and rushed towards them. "How dare you?" Someone laughed angrily. The others also looked gloomy, their killing intent rising. They urged their strength to the extreme and waited. As great emperors from the One family of the immortal Emperor clan, they had never seen such a daring and reckless opponent. Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro looked at each other worriedly. But they saw, as soon as Lin Sun arrived, he attacked fiercely like the wind. He released his cultivation and developed the image of a moving abyss that shrouded the entire area. This power made many people's pupils shrink, and they all had the same thought. This should be that guy's real body. A doppelganger could not possibly have such terrifying power. Rumble, the battle broke out, shaking the heavens and earth. Lin Sun's momentum was like a push, the power released from his body so oppressive that some great emperors found it difficult to breathe, and their expressions changed. Among them, the highest cultivation was a 9th realm great ancestor, while the others were between the 7th and 8th level great emperors. Under normal circumstances, this kind of power was enough to deter the masses and sweep away a region. But this time, it was simply not enough. Moreover, when Mi Wuya and Soft Mist fought, they seemed to be killing decisively, but in fact they held back a lot. Therefore, in just a few blinks of an eye, accompanied by a deafening roar, Lin Sun used his fingers as a sword and killed a 7th level great emperor. The two halves of the body were drowned by the terrifying Taoist light and destroyed. As for the others, they were more or less injured. Even the 9th realm great ancestor could not resist Lin Sun's attack at all. Instead, he was repelled by Lin Sun again and again. This made their faces change completely. How could they imagine that a great emperor who came from a dilapidated place like the starry ancient path, with only a cultivation of the 6th level, could have such heaven-defying combat power? What chilled their hearts the most was that Granny Snow and the others had not returned yet. "Quick! Inform the young master to be on guard," someone roared. However, at this moment, the area near the stagnant whirlpool was suddenly covered by an overwhelming Taoist seal. Chapter 25:14. The formation rumbled as restriction runes surged out like a tidal wave, covering the entire area. 9 Nether entrapment. The Wen clan's martial emperors felt as if they'd fallen into an icy pit. If their young master were to be harmed, even Granny Snow wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. As for the retainers, they were destined to pay with their lives. What shocked them the most was that when the formation appeared, they clearly saw another Lin soon appear and charge into the depths of the whirlpool in a flash. Another clone? The series of events nearly drove the martial emperors insane. While they were distracted, Lin soon killed another 8th level martial emperor. The splattering blood caused the other martial emperors to widen their eyes. They didn't dare to think any more and fought with all their might. At this moment, the worries in Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro's hearts were greatly reduced after the shock. The way they looked at Lin Sun had also changed. After so many years, they didn't dare to imagine how Lin Sun's battle prowess had become so terrifying. Thinking back to when they were on the starry ancient path, they were of the same level and generation. Now that time had passed, they were no longer people of the same world. At the same time, in the giant whirlpool, as soon as Lin Sun's figure entered, a thick golden sword slashed towards him, sweeping up boundless light and releasing a terrifying aura of destruction. Clang! The abyssal sword cauldron appeared in front of Lin Sun, blocking the sword and bursting with dazzling divine radiance. Lin Sun's figure swayed slightly. Opposite him, a figure also swayed and couldn't help but frown. "Ling Xuanzi, you're really courting death." This person was none other than the Imperial Wind Sword Emperor Wen Xiaoheng. He was at the peak of the 7th level of the Great Perfection Emperor realm. When he was refining the Great Tao Ancestral Root, he immediately sensed the commotion outside the giant whirlpool. He didn't pay it much attention at first, confident that Granny Snow and the others could withstand any danger. Who would have thought that as the series of events happened, Wen Xiaoheng couldn't remain calm. He immediately gave up on refining the Great Tao Ancestral Root and hid at the entrance of the giant whirlpool. At this moment, as his voice fell, boom! The golden sword flashed up and flowed with strands of an eternal aura. As it slashed out, it was like the sword of the eternal celestial emperor that slashed down towards the world, and it emanated the might to obliterate the world. A transcendent aura circulated around his body. A rain of light sprinkled down, and the space between his brows was filled with a murderous aura. It was as if he possessed a spirit that could devour mountains and rivers, and a strength that was peerless and divine. With just a single sword strike, he had displayed a terrifying battle prowess that far exceeded his peers. However, Lin Sun didn't hold back at all. The abyssal sword cauldron roared and fought head-on. Because he was very clearly aware that he absolutely couldn't waste even the slightest bit of time in the current situation, and he had to act swiftly and swiftly. Just like before, he released his doppelgangers to lure Granny Shui and the black-robed man away. Then, he fought the Wen clan's great emperors head-on. It was nothing more than to fight for an opportunity to set up a formation. Now that the 9th Hell God confinement formation had been formed, all that remained was to deal with Wen Xiaoheng. Dang! 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 Earth-shattering collisions resounded as the golden sword clashed with the abyssal sword cauldron. In the blink of an eye, they had already exchanged dozens of blows. The battle had just begun, but it was already dangerous and intense. What surprised Lin Sun was that Wen Xiaoheng was extremely powerful. He was far more powerful than the average peerless martial artist, and he had a strong foundation. Lin Sun's attacks were all neutralized. This was the first time Lin Sun had encountered such a powerful opponent over the years. Even a ninth realm great ancestor was slightly inferior to Wen Xiaoheng. At the same time, Wen Xiaoheng's heart couldn't calm down. He was regarded as a young master and listed in the Wen clan's 5 ultimate emperors because he was a rare genius that only appeared once in 10,000 years. His cultivation had been tempered to become extremely strong. In the 8,000 years since he started cultivating, he had a place of his own in the eternal true world. His name had spread far and wide, and he had been praised by many immortal figures. But Wen Xiaoheng had never expected that a 6th-tier great emperor from the ancient path of stars could cross a realm and fight him head-on. This was too unbelievable. If such a character had appeared in the eternal true world, it would have been understandable. At the very least, based on what Wen Xiaoheng knew, there were some immortal emperors who could not be measured with common sense among them who brought out the power of heavenly order. But Wen Xiaoheng found it hard to accept that such a person had appeared in a remote and declining universe like the ancient path of stars. Kill! His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his handsome face was filled with killing intent. His aura was like a raging storm, and he released all of his cultivation. He absolutely could not allow this to continue. Otherwise, if news of this spread, the Wen clan's reputation would be tarnished. After all, he was born in the Wen clan. Ever since he was born, he had enjoyed the best cultivation resources, practiced the best cultivation methods, and had many old antiques by his side to guide him. If he couldn't even take down a person who walked out of the ancient path of stars, he would be too useless. Struggling is futile. Lin Sun's expression was indifferent. He was neither sad nor happy. Only the aura around him grew stronger and stronger, as if it was going to rise steadily. Every time the abyssal sword cauldron swept out, it produced an unparalleled suppressive force. No matter how Wen Xiaoheng struggled, his attacks were destroyed one by one. Soon, amidst the sounds of explosions and collisions, Wen Xiaoheng was suppressed to the point of retreating. His handsome face turned livid. He found it hard to believe, and his heart was filled with rage. But every time Lin Sun attacked, it was like a natural moat pressing down on him. Every time he tried to dispel it, his qi and blood would surge, his internal organs would be shaken, and his body would feel a stabbing pain. It became strenuous for him to resist. How was this possible? How was this possible? Wen Xiaoheng roared in his heart. His eyes were filled with madness and violence. Suddenly, he waved his hand. Buzz! A strange gray shuttle-shaped talisman shot out. Lin Sun's pupils shrank, and he immediately put the abyssal sword cauldron in front of him. Boom! In an instant, he felt a terrifying and irresistible force collide with the abyssal sword cauldron. He couldn't help but stagger back, and the qi and blood in his body surged. The abyssal sword cauldron shook violently and buzzed. Even the silent spirit talisman can be blocked? In the distance, Wen Xiaoheng was even more stunned. He almost couldn't believe his eyes. This was his trump card. It was personally refined by an immortal figure. The talisman was branded with the breath of immortality. Its power was so terrifying that it could easily kill a ninth realm ancestor. But now it was blocked by Lin Sun. This is your trump card? Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with strong killing intent. Swish! His figure turned illusory, and the remaining 2 Tao bodies rushed out together. One was using the Tower of Endless, which was sprinkling billions of brilliant light. The other was using the Broken Blade, which was emitting a monstrous murderous aura. Together with the original body, they rushed towards Wen Xiaoheng. Wen Xiaoheng was weak. Lin Sun alone had already suppressed him to the point that he couldn't even lift his head. Now there were 2 more. How could he fight? In just a moment, Wen Xiaoheng was seriously injured. His body was scorched, and he kept coughing up blood. If it wasn't for the mysterious green armor he wore, which helped him resolve most of the attacks, he probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. Ling Xuanzi, just you wait. When Xiaoheng let out a roar, he suddenly crushed a silver talisman, and the magical formation was instantly covered by a dark blue light. Boom! His figure flashed, and he actually tore a hole in the giant whirlpool and rushed out. How could Lin Sun let him escape? He immediately rushed out. Outside the giant whirlpool, the Tao pattern restriction formation rumbled. Little Five, who was sitting inside, immediately activated the power of the formation. Therefore, as soon as Wen Xiaoheng rushed out, he was directly suppressed by the layers of Tao pattern restriction formation. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. If it wasn't for the dark blue Taoist light that enveloped his body and helped him neutralize the terrifying pressure, he would have been completely suppressed and wouldn't have been able to struggle. This damn thing! When Xiaoheng's face turned ugly, he completely realized that something was wrong. Boom! Without giving Wen Xiaoheng a chance to breathe, Lin Sun and his clone had already rushed over. The Abyssal Sword Cauldron, the Tower of Endless, and the Broken Blade attacked at the same time. When Xiaoheng's soul almost came out of his body, and he let out a furious roar, "Open!" A white jade pendant hanging on his neck suddenly glowed, and a mighty and boundless illusory figure emerged. The figure was like an immortal god, and as soon as it appeared, it swung its fist. The formation rumbled, and the world seemed to be turned upside down. Lin Sun's treasures and Tao were all pushed back by this punch. This made Lin Sun's eyes narrow, and he immediately judged that this was probably the will of an immortal figure. The aura it revealed was too powerful. "Open!" When Xiaoheng roared, the majestic illusory figure formed a seal with both hands, and an indescribably terrifying aura gathered at this moment. Lin Sun's expression immediately changed, and he let out a roar, "Little Five, retreat." Xiaowu didn't hesitate to fly out at the first possible moment. Boom! An earth-shaking roar resounded, and the ninth nether god trapping formation exploded. Countless light torrents splashed out and it swept out. That kind of power made the floating land under his feet shake violently. Even though Lin Sun had resisted with all his strength and pushed his strength to the extreme, he was still shaken and flew out. A trace of blood flowed out of his lips, and his face turned slightly pale. Looking at the battlefield again, the majestic figure had long disappeared, and even Wen Xiaoheng could not be found. Obviously, after breaking the formation, Wen Xiaoheng did not dare to hesitate at all, and chose to escape immediately. Lin Sun's eyebrows were clouded. Wen Xiaoheng's combat power was indeed strong, and Fang Xuanzhen from the Daheng Sword House could not compare with him. But for Lin Sun, Wen Xiaoheng was not a big threat. The only thing he did not expect was that Wen Xiaoheng had more than 1 or 2 trump cards. If not, Wen Xiaoheng would not have been able to escape today. But thinking about it, how could Wen Xiaoheng, a great emperor from the immortal emperor family, have less trump cards to save his life? Just as Lin Sun's expression was uncertain, smoke and dust dispersed, and the doppelganger that had been fighting with the Wen family's great emperor realm swept over from afar. Literature Hall. Chapter 25-15. Through the memories of his doppelganger, Lin Sun learned that the group of emperors from the Wen family had all been killed. Only Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro were captured alive. The reason why they were captured alive was simple. Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro seemed to be worried about something and deliberately let Lin Sun's doppelganger do it. Now, both of them were in the treasure of Lin Sun's doppelganger. Lin Sun was in no hurry to ask about their situation. He was waiting. Soon, the doppelganger that went to kill the black-robed man and the silver-robed woman returned. Lin Sun immediately learned that the black-robed man had been killed and the silver-robed woman Yin Huang escaped with a strange secret method. However, she was also seriously injured and would not be able to recover in a short time. Lin Sun was not surprised by this. The black-robed man and the silver-robed woman were both Ninth Realm ancestors. Although they were not as strong as Granny Snow, it would be difficult to kill both of them in a 1-on-2 situation. after the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. The doppelganger that was fighting with Granny Snow finally returned. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed in an instant. The doppelganger was injured. Lin Sun sensed it and immediately understood the specific situation. Although Granny Snow was not a Tao ancestor, she was not far from it. She even held a law bell imprinted with immortal aura. The sound of the bell spread, oppressing people's spirit and state of mind. An ordinary emperor would have been shattered by the sound of the bell. Although the doppelganger was not trapped by the bell in the battle, it was greatly impacted and suppressed, so much so that it suffered a lot in the battle. Most importantly, the abyssal sword cauldron, the Tower of Endless and other treasures were in Lin Sun's hands, so none of the doppelganger's treasures could compete with the bell. After understanding this, Lin Sun put away the doppelganger and ordered, "Little Five." Whoosh! Little Five's figure flashed over. In the previous battle, he had dodged in time and was not affected. Set up the Tao Falling Death sword here. No matter who invades, kill without mercy. After saying this, Lin Sun walked into the stagnant huge whirlpool. It was incredible. The battle from before had been intense and terrifying, but whether it was the floating land beneath their feet or the giant vortex, neither of them had been damaged. However, it was obvious when he thought about it. In the countless years of the past, countless extraordinary figures had fought and killed in the Spectre Soul domain, yet this expanse of the universe hadn't been destroyed. Not long after Lin entered the huge whirlpool, buzz, countless rune diagrams surged, covering the sky and covering the earth. Unlike the 9 Nether God trapping technique, the might of the Tao Falling Heaven slaying technique was enough to kill a 9th realm ancestor. Little Five sat there with a solemn expression. At the same time, that guy actually dared to kill when Xiaoheng of the One family. In the starry sky far away from the floating continent, Xing Mutian and the others witnessed everything that had happened. They couldn't help but be shocked. I'm not trying to kill him, but have you ever thought that among all the emperors who entered the gate of the earth and earth realm with us, who would have thought that Ling Xuanzi's battle prowess would be so abnormal? Someone had a solemn expression. No wonder he dared to openly offend when Xiaoheng and the others on the extradition Tao platform. It turns out that he has something to rely on, but, if he does that, he will have completely offended the One family. Can he bear the consequences? The crowd discussed. Only Xing Mutian let out a long sigh. His expression was complicated. When it comes to battle prowess, I can't compare to him. When it comes to courage, I can't even compare. His words made everyone around him look at each other. We all think that we will have to bear unimaginable consequences if we offend the One family. Has Ling Xuanzi not thought about it? Even under such circumstances, he still dared to do such a thing. It doesn't matter whether he has something to rely on or not. His courage is not something an ordinary great emperor can compare to. Xing Mutian let out a long sigh. What's more, so what if we offend the One family? The eternal true world is vast, and there are many immortal emperor clans there. If we really enter the eternal true world in the future, do we have to worry about offending those immortal emperor clans? Do we have to be afraid of them? How preposterous! He seemed to have understood something, and a fierce look appeared in his eyes. The Great Thousand Battle Domain is a path of no return. We don't even know if we can survive. If that's the case, why should we be afraid of those immortal emperor clans? In the future, no matter who they are, we won't retreat. Once he finished speaking, Xing Mutian turned around and left. Lin Sun's battle had shocked him too much. He had also come to a sudden realization and broken the shackles in his heart. Around the floating continent, there were many people who had witnessed the battle like Xing Mutian and his party. All of them were shocked, and their hearts were in turmoil. They could not calm down. However, there were only a few people who could be moved like Xing Mutian and change their state of mind. Most of them were wary of Lin Sun. They saw Lin Sun as a great enemy. Some people laughed coldly and gloated. They thought that Lin Sun's actions were no different from drawing fire to himself. He would have to bear unimaginable consequences. There were also people who were eager to make a move, and they glared at Lin Sun. When Xiaoheng and his party had already been defeated, and only Lin Sun was left on the floating continent, enjoying the Great Way ancestral route alone. This was undoubtedly the best time for him to take advantage of the situation. But even so, they had to weigh the consequences of fighting for the Great Way ancestral route. After all, the combat power Lin Sun had displayed was too terrifying. In short, these emperors who had yet to leave had their own thoughts. But no matter what, Lin Sun's name was firmly etched in their minds. The news spread, and soon, the emperors in various places in the undead soul realm learned about the bloody battle. For a time, there was a lot of discussion and uproar. I didn't know that this guy was a wolf in sheep's clothing. The Jade Star Absolute Emperor was stunned when he heard the news. She had once intervened in a confrontation against Lin Sun in the ancient nightmare battlefield. One reason was to snatch the origin orb, and the other was to do Lin Sun a favor. After all, they were fellow travelers, who had entered the gate of the Earth-Kuan realm together. But now, the Jade Star Absolute Emperor realized that he had underestimated Ling Xuanzi's strength. Great! That's what a man should do. Ning Daoji was stunned when he heard the news. After a long time, he let out a hearty laugh. Since ancient times, the cultivators of the eternal true world have always acted high and mighty, even if they are weaker than us. But who dares to deal a heavy blow like Ling Xuanzi did? After hearing the news, the reckless scholar emperor exclaimed in admiration. Fang Xuanzhen and the others from the Daheng Sword House have yet to appear. Could it be that they've already been killed by Ling Xuanzi? There were also people who made bold guesses. All the experts who entered through the Earth-Kuan realm gate. It was clear that Lin Sun not only had a falling out with Wen Xiaoheng and his men, but also had a grudge against Fang Xuanzhen and his men. But up until now, Fang Xuanzhen's group still hadn't revealed themselves. This caused others to be unable to help but wonder if they'd suffered misfortune. At the same time, on a barren floating continent, I must kill this Ling Xuanzi. When Xiaoheng's hair was disheveled, his face was ashen, and his aura was terrifying. Young master, please calm down. If we set off now, we will reach the first immortal Emperor city in the Great Thousand Battle Domain in less than 3 months. Granny Shue's expression was extremely grim. She gritted her teeth and said, "During these 3,000 years, the ones guarding this city are the Heng clan that has a deep relationship with our Wen clan. At that time, we can borrow the Heng clan's strength to kill this brat." Borrow the Heng clan's strength? When Xiaoheng felt a strong sense of humiliation in his heart. Since when did he, Wen Xiaoheng, have to resort to external help? Young master, don't let your emotions affect your decisions. For a descendant of the heavens like yourself, besides your own cultivation and treasures, your own identity, status, and connections are also part of your strength. Granny Shui consoled. Why do the experts of the Great Thousand World revere you so much? Apart from being afraid of your cultivation, they are even more afraid of your identity and the connections you have. This is your advantage, and also the power that our Wen clan has possessed since ancient times. Young master, you were born extraordinary, so why don't you use it? Her words made Wen Xiaoheng fall into silence, and he only spoke after a long time. Did the others suffer? Granny Shui flipped her hand and took out a black jade book that was branded with an obscure aura. She sized it up and couldn't help but frown. The 2 slaves that were imprisoned by young master are still alive. When Xiaoheng was stunned, only the 2 of them are left? Granny Shui nodded. Strange, why did Ling Xuanzi spare their lives? Is it just because they came from the starry ancient path? When Xiaoheng said in annoyance, what's the point of saying that? They're just 2 slaves. So what if they're saved? Their fate souls have already been planted with the power of the curse of 10,000 extinction. If they think that they can escape from my control just like that, then they're gravely mistaken. Granny Shue's eyes flickered, and she came up with a plan. Young master, if they're still alive, they'll be of some use to us. At the very least, when we want to take revenge in the future, we can use their auras to locate Ling Xuanzi. When Xiaoheng frowned, what if they're not with Ling Xuanzi? Granny Shui smiled sinisterly. That's simple. Swish. She swiped her palm across the black jade book and found two strange twisted symbols, which represented the power of Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro's curse. Then, rays of light appeared on Granny Shui's fingertips, and she pressed them on the two strange symbols. A moment later, Granny Shui put away the black jade book and said, Young master, I've already ordered them to follow Ling Xuanzi no matter what. If they dare to disobey, I'll activate the power of the curse of 10,000 extinction and kill them. When Xiaoheng nodded, then suddenly said, I just don't know if Ling Xuanzi is that Lin Sun. If he really is Lin Sun, then capturing him alive is more useful to me. Granny Shui's eyes flashed with a strange light and she laughed softly. That's not difficult. When we capture him, we'll definitely be able to see through his identity. All right, let's do that, Wen Xiaoheng said decisively. Chapter 25:16. In the huge whirlpool, Lin Sun was conversing with Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro, who had just woken up. Lin Sun quickly resolved some of his doubts. It turned out that when Heavenly Emperor Shi was killed, Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro had traveled through the galaxy together, intending to seek the path to the other shore. Their journey was quite similar to Lin Sun's. They had experienced many dangers along the way, and had passed through collapsed and dried-up universes. They had also entered some extremely prosperous universes, where they were inevitably seen as prey and hunted down. Although the two of them were peerless figures who stood at the pinnacle of the starry sky ancient path, they were still not strong enough to face off against martial emperors with higher cultivation levels. As a result, the two were unfortunately captured alive by a Realm 9 ancestor after entering a certain galaxy. The two of them had originally thought that they would suffer a calamity, but who would have thought that after learning of their origins, the 9th Realm ancestor would imprison them and treat them as slaves before selling them to Wen Xiaoheng. Wen Xiaoheng did not kill them. Instead, he planted a strange forbidden curse in their souls and took complete control of them. Later, the two found out that any emperor who walked out of the ancient path of stars and headed to the other shore had a bounty on their heads. Any captured person could be exchanged for 100,000 first-class Eternity Source crystals. 10,000 first-class Eternity Source crystals was enough to tempt any emperor. 100,000 was enough to make any Realm 9 ancestor jealous and drool. Therefore, all the universes along the way had their eyes on the emperors who crossed the ancient path of stars. This was also why Lin Sun and the other emperors of the ancient path of stars were constantly besieged along the way. Lin Sun, for example, had been intercepted countless times. Who issued the bounty? Lin Sun could not help but ask. 100,000 first-class Eternity Source crystals in exchange for an emperor of the ancient path of stars. This was a huge sum. Ordinary forces could not afford it. The Permitha Luo clan. Mi Wuya gave an answer that was both unexpected and reasonable to Lin Sun. Because only the Permitha Luo clan, who had controlled the ancient path of stars with the forbidden power of order for countless years, could do such a crazy thing. Then do you know why the Luo clan is doing this? Lin Sun pondered. This must be the Luo clan's revenge on the starry sky ancient path. Mi Wuya's expression was gloomy. Venerable D Nameless is dead, and so is Heavenly Emperor Shi. How can the Permitha Luo clan not be furious? Beside him, Misty Rain also nodded, agreeing with this conjecture. Lin Sun thought to himself, these two were not the only ones who died. There was also the purple-robed woman, Yan Xing, the 7th elder of Luo family, Luo Xingfeng, and a great emperor named Luo Qin. This was especially so for Luo Qin, who was seen as one of the most dazzling martial emperors among the younger generation of the Luo clan. He was extremely talented, and had an unparalleled foundation. He was born to cultivate. It was said that this person had awakened the Luo family's top bloodline latent ability, Star Fire Spirit Spiral. He had only cultivated for less than 800 years, but he was already a 4th-level Ju-Ing martial emperor. This was much faster than Wen Xiaoheng, who had cultivated for 8,000 years and was a 7th-stage Ju-Di realm martial emperor. But this Luo Qin had long been killed by Lin Sun in the immortal Phoenix realm. By then, Lin Sun had already gained some understanding of the situation in Eternal True World. Through comparing himself to Wen Xiaoheng, he could deduce one thing. Luo Chen's death must have infuriated the entire Luo family. There was also Luo Xingfeng, Nameless Emperor, Shi Tiandi Zi, and the female Star Yen. All of them were important figures in the Luo family, but all of them had met with misfortune on the starry ancient path. How could the Luo family not go crazy? From this, it could be deduced why they would issue such a bounty for martial emperors on the starry ancient path. However, Lin Sun had a vague feeling that this was only one of the reasons. The Luo family probably had another purpose for doing so. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun asked, "What kind of status does Wen Xiaoheng have? Why does he care about the Luo family's bounty?" Speaking of this matter, Mi Wuya looked at Lin Sun with a complicated expression. "Speaking of which, this matter should have something to do with Brother Lin." "Me?" Lin Sun was stunned. Beside him, Yenyu said softly, "This Wen Xiaoheng has always been in love with a woman from the Luo family called Luo Ling. It is said that the bounty issued by the Luo family this time came from Luo Ling, perhaps to curry favor with Luo Ling, when Xiaoheng found out from somewhere that Brother Lin is the first peerless figure to become a martial emperor on the starry ancient path in the last 100,000 years. So, he has been trying to capture Brother Lin and give him to Luo Ling as a gift. For this, Wen Xiaoheng even sent many people to cross the void and head to the starry ancient path. But after searching for a long time, they did not find any trace of Brother Lin." Hearing this, Lin Sun could not help but raise his eyebrows. Just to curry favor with a woman, when Xiaoheng is so unscrupulous? This seemed very absurd. It is said that Luo Ling is a legend of the Luo family. She was born with the 9 ultimate divine body, and her talent and cultivation far surpass that of others. Coupled with her outstanding appearance, temperament, and charm, she is also very famous in the Eternal True World and is worshipped as a celestial fairy. Yenyu said, "When Xiaoheng once casually said that in order to pursue a fairy like Luo Ling, he naturally has to be creative in order to capture the heart of a beauty." Lin Sun sneered with a deep look in his eyes. In order to pursue a woman, he wanted to capture him and offer him to Luo Ling. This Wen Xiaoheng was too arrogant. At that moment, he finally understood why Mi Wuya and Yenyu had been left by Wen Xiaoheng's side. Perhaps it was precisely because they had failed to capture him that Mi Wuya and Yenyu were treated as prey that Wen Xiaoheng was about to offer to Luo Ling. "What do the two of you plan to do next?" Lin Sun asked. Mi Wuya's expression was gloomy. "We can't control our own fate. What else can we do?" Yenyu's expression also became gloomy. Just like Mi Wuya, her life soul had been planted with the forbidden spell of 10,000 despair. Even if Wen Xiaoheng had saved her, she was destined to be unable to escape from Wen Xiaoheng's control. This was also why they had not dared to communicate with Lin Sun through voice transmission from the moment they met in the guide city until the moment they were rescued. With Wen Xiaoheng around, the moment they transmitted their voices, they would be detected immediately. After understanding this, killing intent flashed in Lin Sun's eyes. He said, "It's a pity that I let that guy escape this time. Otherwise, I would have definitely been able to remove the forbidden spell from them." Right at that moment, Mi Wuya and Yenyu suddenly let out muffled groans in unison as if they were in pain. Soon after, their expressions changed and became uncertain, as if they had encountered an extremely difficult problem. "What's wrong?" Lin Sun asked. Mi Wuya and Yenyu looked at each other. They were struggling in their hearts and appeared extremely hesitant. After a long time, Mi Wuya finally came to a decision. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Previously, Miss Yuro and I received a clear order from Wen Xiaoheng to follow Brother Lin no matter what. Otherwise, we will definitely die." Yanyu also felt bitter. She nodded and said, "According to my speculation, Wen Xiaoheng probably did this to locate Brother Lin based on our tracks. This way, if he wants to take revenge on Brother Lin, he will definitely be able to find Brother Lin immediately." Lin Sun suddenly understood and smiled. "If that's the case, it's actually a good thing. I can't wait for him to come and throw away his life." "Then," he asked curiously, "then can you sense Wen Xiaoheng's location?" Mi Wuya and Yanyu shook their heads. Lin Sun pondered for a moment and said, "Forget it. You don't have to worry about this matter. From now on, you just need to follow me. When Xiaoheng comes looking for you, I will naturally deal with him and remove the shackles on you." Mi Wuya and Yanyu were stunned. They looked ashamed and embarrassed. After all, they had been enemies on the ancient path of the stars and fought in the forbidden ancient immortal zone. But now Lin Sun was standing up for them regardless of the risk. How could they not feel ashamed? Not touched? What happened in the past is ultimately a conflict of youth. Our standpoints are different, so there is no right or wrong in what we do. Lin Sun smiled and comforted the two. Only then did they feel a little more at ease. Next, Mi Wuya and Yanyu walked out of the giant vortex and stood guard in the Fallen Dao formation with Little Five. Lin Sun did not waste any more time and arrived at the end of the giant vortex. It was dazzling, resplendent, and suffused with the miraculous radiance of the Grand Dao. If one looked carefully, it was surprisingly a Grand Dao ancestral root. Regardless of its size or appearance, it far surpassed the Grand Dao ancestral root that Lin Sun had refined earlier, and it could be said to be shocking. Moreover, the Grand Dao ancestral root was covered in an alms bowl. It was suffused with a bronze color and emanated an indestructible aura. There was no need to guess to know that this treasure came from Wen Xiaoheng. The reason it was placed on the Grand Dao ancestral root was clearly because he was worried that the Grand Dao ancestral root would be affected by the battle. But now it had benefited Lin Sun. Lin Sun flicked his sleeve and put away the bronze alms bowl. It was a mid-rank spirit-grade emperor artifact, and it far exceeded ordinary treasures. It was of extraordinary value. However, Lin Sun didn't even spare it a glance before putting it away casually. Such a treasure wasn't very useful to him. After thinking for a moment, Lin Sun released all his 5 Dao forms and sat cross-legged at the side of the Grand Dao ancestral root with his main body before starting to meditate. In next to no time, the surging and resplendent rain of the Grand Dao completely drowned Lin Sun and his clones. Time flowed by bit by bit. The floating continent was deathly silent, but there were still many figures in the shadows that hadn't left. Swoosh! After a long time, a figure was finally unable to restrain himself, and he suddenly teleported through space and charged out explosively to arrive in the sky above the floating continent. However, he was very cautious and didn't approach it. He withdrew a bright flaming flying sword and slashed it towards the grand formation that enveloped the enormous vortex. Bang! The grand formation shook while an imperceptible rift appeared on it. Even though it quickly closed up, it still allowed that figure to instantly feel much more at ease. He gritted his teeth and charged over explosively. At the same time, numerous Emperor Realm figures that were scattered in the shadows were eager to make a move, and they paid close attention to all of this. It seemed like so long as they had the slightest chance, then they would attack ferociously. Author's note: I'll break out tomorrow. Literature Library. Chapter 25:17. The bright flaming flying sword swept up, as if it was dragging a heavenly river of flames, and slashed down across the sky. The formation rumbled and a crack appeared. That figure was obviously a 9th realm ancestor. When he saw the opportunity, he immediately teleported and rushed into the formation. Let's go! Let's go too! In the shadows, the experts that had been accumulating strength since a long time ago charged out without the slightest hesitation at this moment, and they wanted to seize this opportunity to fight. However, as soon as they arrived on the floating continent, a furious roar suddenly resounded. "Damn it, you cheated!" That one sentence caused the expressions of the figures who had rushed to the floating land to change. Cheated? Then, the Tao Fall Heavenly Death Formation was activated. The Tao Pattern Formation flickered and rolled, covering the sky as if it was going to refine the world. No! The Realm 9 ancestor let out a shrill scream. However, in the blink of an eye, it stopped abruptly and became completely silent. Only the Tao Fall Heavenly Death Formation rumbled and lit up the starry sky. Retreat! Those figures that were charging over felt a chill run down their spines, and their faces turned pale with astonishment. They chose to retreat at the first possible moment. Even a Realm 9 ancestor had been killed. One could imagine how terrifying the formation was. For a time, the floating land became quiet again. It was like a silent dragon's lair, and no one dared to approach. In the formation, Little Five felt his heart ache. Under his control, he had purposely revealed some flaws in the Tao Fall Heavenly Death Formation to lure the Realm 9 ancestor into the trap and kill him in one go. However, in just a moment, the Tao Fall Heavenly Death Formation had used up 3,000 Grade 1 Eternity Source crystals. However, after checking the Realm 9 ancestor's belongings, Little Five beamed and thought to himself, "Lin Sun will definitely not scold me this time." These belongings, treasures, divine materials, and other divine materials were worth far more than 3,000 Grade 1 Eternity Source crystals. Apart from that, the Realm 9 ancestor had more than 5,000 Grade 1 Eternity Source crystals on him. I wonder if anyone will dare to come and test me. Little Five stroked his chin and fell into deep thought. Mi Wuya and Yen Yuro, who were also overseeing the formation, could not help but be shocked speechless. Kill the ancestor. With this powerful formation alone, Lin Sun could walk on the ancient starry sky path unhindered. Even in the Great Thousand Battle Domains, it was a trump card that could intimidate everyone. It was a daunting sight. What made Little Five feel regretful was that no one else came to take the risk in the following period of time. Clearly, they were all frightened. 6 hours later, within the enormous whirlpool, Lin Sun had completely refined the ancestral root of the Great Tao. His cultivation rose explosively, and he stepped into the perfection stage of the 6th-level Emperor realm. Awesome! Lin Sun's black eyes were bright and deep with joy. He had only been in the Spectre Soul realm for a few days, but his cultivation had already improved by leaps and bounds. If he had been in the outside world, he would have needed many years of hard work to achieve this. My cultivation has already attained perfection. Now, it's impossible for my cultivation to improve no matter how many grand Tao ancestral roots I refine. Soon, Lin Sun realized that if he wanted to make progress in his cultivation, he had to break through the realm. Unfortunately, breaking through the realm wasn't something that could be achieved by hard work, but an opportunity. The 7th level of the Emperor realm was known as the Void Refinement realm. My heart is as bright as the moon. I and the universe are both the outside and the inside, refining the void into reality. In the vast starry sky outside the Emperor's realm. This was a Taoist hymn that described the Void Refinement realm. It said that when a cultivator reached this realm, he would condense thousands of Daos in the Emperor's realm and open up a starry sky. The sun and moon would shine brightly in it, and the great Tao that fell from it would form a clear and turbid harmony with the Emperor's realm. As long as a cultivator reached this realm, his cultivation would be shrouded in divine light, and his Dharma form would be perfected. Both the form and the spirit would be wonderful, and the void would be complete, returning emptiness to reality. In fact, It was a process of transforming one's cultivation from being to nothingness. Nothingness was nothingness. Only by cultivating nothingness could one return to reality. To put it simply, it was to return emptiness to reality. This was the void refinement realm. One had already begun to touch the mysteries of the great Tao between emptiness and reality, existence and nothingness, and reality and emptiness. The 7th level of the void refinement realm, the 8th level of the unification realm, the 9th level of the ancestral root. I wonder what kind of mysteries can be comprehended in creating life and death between existence and nothingness. Lin Sun was lost in thought. A long time ago, when he broke through the 8th level of Green Cloud Path, Tao breaking, he comprehended a forbidden realm. The great Tao was the origin of the world. The ultimate pursuit of the cultivators was hidden in the mysteries of the world's operation. If there was a universe in one's heart, one could control it. One day, if one could build a world by one's own strength, deduce the order of the cycle, and change all things, what was the difference between him and the supreme creator in the legend? The power mastered in this realm was not to turn the rotten into the magical, but to create and destroy. To create life and death between existence and nothingness. This was the so-called making something out of nothing. In the past, Lin Sun didn't know that even in the Emperor realm, very few people could reach this realm. But now, after many years of travel, with the gradual improvement of cultivation, Lin Sun had faintly realized that this realm was indeed a taboo. At least the ancestors of the 9 realms didn't have such power. No wonder she was so uneasy when she knew this. Lin Sun thought of the past. In Shi's understanding, making something out of nothing and creating life and death between existence and nothingness was like a taboo. But Lin Sun didn't understand this at all. Similarly, in the mulberry forest, the young man with golden cicada also lost his composure when he learned that Lin Sun had seen the realm of making something out of nothing before he became a saint. Lin Sun clearly remembered that the young man with golden cicada was stunned at that time. He looked up at Lin Sun and asked, "Do you also know this realm?" Lin Sun's answer was, "Just a glimpse." Even so, the young man with golden cicada was still full of praise. Now, Lin Sun had long known that the young man with golden cicada had the reputation of, although the cicada was small, the Tao was higher than the sky. In the game of chess that year, the golden cicada showed a terrifying and boundless power and killed the ancestors of the emperors like raindrops. Ruosu, the 3rd senior sister, was extremely amazed. But a long time ago, the young man with golden cicada was surprised by Lin Sun's making something out of nothing. Could be imagined how wonderful the realm of making something out of nothing was. Now, when Lin Sun returned to the past and many details and pictures that he didn't care about emerged in his mind, he realized that the realm of making something out of nothing was not simple. It was indeed like a taboo. At least, Lin Sun had killed many emperors over the years, but he had never seen one with such a Taoan inline character. Maybe only when I reach the 7th, 8th, or 9th realm, I can uncover some mysteries of making something out of nothing. Lin Sun came to a sudden realization. The 7th level of void training, the 8th level of Tao reunion and the 9th level of ancestor returning were actually a realm to improve cultivation between reality and nothingness. After a long time, Lin Sun got rid of distractions and said, "Green Sparrow, I'm going to leave the realm of the dead." In order to break through the realm? Green Sparrow asked. Obviously, she also noticed that Lin Sun's cultivation had reached the peak of the 6th level and needed to break through the realm to improve his strength. Lin Sun nodded, yes. Green Sparrow said without hesitation, "In the deepest part of the realm of the dead, there is a tunnel of wreckage. It is said that it is paved with the corpses of the most powerful figures of the last era. If you step on this path, you can enter the next battlefield, the Sunluo underworld." Then, Green Sparrow introduced the Sunluo underworld. The Sunluo underworld was huge and full of treachery. It was said that it was originally part of the Ghost Nether region in the last era. But with the destruction of the last era, the Sunluo underworld had already collapsed. Now, that place had already turned into a place of great danger. Soldiers, generals and kings of hell appeared all year round. Even the weakest soldier of hell could kill an expert within the 3rd level of the Emperor realm. And a character at the level of hell could threaten a cultivator below the 7th level of the Emperor realm. As for the kings of hell, they were the most terrifying. Some powerful kings of hell could even kill ancestors of the 9th realm. There are no fortuitous encounters or serendipities in Dark Abyss lands, but if you kill the ferocious creatures in the Abyss lands, you will have a chance to obtain underworld pearls. These pearls have unbelievable effects when it comes to refining Emperor weapons. In the Eternal True World, an Abyss King level underworld pearl can be sold for 300,000 Eternal Void origin crystals. Green Sparrow spoke frankly with assurance. Of course, very few people would sell such a treasure. After all, it is not easy to collect such a treasure. Lin Sun was a little tempted when he heard this. Although his cultivation was improving by leaps and bounds, the power of the Abyssal Sword Cauldron was increasing at an extremely slow pace. If he could obtain a divine item like the Underworld Pearl, it might be able to increase the speed of the Abyssal Sword Cauldron's advancement. Without any delay, Lin Sun got up and walked out of the huge vortex. On that day, Lin Sun brought Mi Huia and Yenyu with him, and rushed towards the deepest part of the realm of the dead. Along the way, he saw many battles, all of which had arisen because of the fight for the Great Path ancestral route. Lin Sun was no longer interested in participating in those battles. He hurriedly left like a passerby. 6 hours later, the passageway that Green Sparrow spoke of had finally appeared within Lin Sun's field of vision. It was said to be a passageway, yet it was actually like a spacious path that led to the depths of the starry sky. Countless snow-white and broken bones were piled up and laid out, and it was like a white ray of light that stretched towards the depths of the starry sky. Those bones had lost their divinity since a long time ago, yet they were still extremely firm after experiencing the corrosion of time. Before heading to the Sunluo underworld, I have to remind you that there's a mysterious restricted area there, and it's filled with mysterious, unfathomable, and great terror. Since ancient times until now, many almighty figures have perished there. Green Sparrow's intelligent eyes were suffused with a strange expression, and she suddenly said, however, I suggest that you go there. Lin Sun was stunned. What do you mean? That mysterious restricted area is boundlessly terrifying to others, yet it might be a rare place of fortuitous encounters to you. It all depends on if you have the courage to go there. Green Sparrow's words were secretive. P.S. There will be 2 chapters before 7 p.m. Literature Library. Chapter 25:18. Before entering the Kiliakosm battlefield, Cyan Sparrow once said, on this bloody road of no return, there were at least thousands of battlefields, nearly 100 mysterious forbidden areas, and 49 immortal passes of various sizes. And the mysterious forbidden areas were described as the most dangerous and terrifying place. Lin Sun couldn't help but be awestruck. He didn't know how terrible the so-called mysterious forbidden areas in the Sunluo underworld that Cyan Sparrow mentioned were. If the time is right, I'd like to have a try, Lin Sun said after thinking for a while. Cyan Sparrow said, it will take about 2 months to get through the Sunluo underworld. After that, you can reach the first Immortal Pass, which is also called the Immortal Emperor City. It's too early to talk about this now. You'll understand when you get there. Lin Sun nodded and walked along the wreckage tunnel towards the depths of the starry sky. There was a strange, shifting power on this tunnel. Walking on it made people feel like they were traveling through time and space and roaming in the universe. In just 15 minutes, with a burst of space ripples, Lin Sun came to a strange world in a blink of an eye. There was a purple sun hanging in the lead gray sky. Its luster was dim, making the world dim. The wind was whistling, sobbing and complaining, cold and gloomy. All kinds of cold airflows were flowing in the air, making people feel extremely depressed. Lin Sun was located on the bank of a river. Further ahead was a sparse jungle. The trees were all bare, dark and withered, emitting wisps of black smoke. Cyan Sparrow suddenly said, "According to the ancient legend, after death in the last era, the souls of all living beings in the world would enter the netherworld, walk the yellow spring road, cross the river of forgetfulness, drink the soup of Mengpe, and then enter the 6 paths of the netherworld to be reincarnated according to their good and evil deeds. And there are many mysterious and terrible places in the netherworld, such as the Gate of Hell, the 18 levels of Hell, the Sinful Blood River, and so on. The great figures that control the Netherhell are even more terrifying. They possess mysterious and unfathomable supreme divine abilities, are skilled in the Tao of life souls, and control the energy of destiny. According to the saying of our era, existences that are able to possess such attainments have at least peeked into some secrets of the Tao of destiny." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. He had heard from Cyan Sparrow that the previous era was called the Immortal Martial Era, and the current era was called the Spirit Martial Era. However, he only knew a concept. He knew nothing about what had happened in the last era and what sort of changes had led to the final destruction. Perhaps only when he reached the eternal true world would he have more chances to understand the various secrets of the change of eons. Of course, if one's cultivation attained the state of prying into the profundities of eternity and comprehending the laws of destiny, then one would similarly be able to stand above the myriad of Daos, look down upon the changes of the world, see through the profundities of the passage of time, and experience the secrets of the rise and fall of an era. There's only a single path of survival in this ghastly netherworld, and it's called the Nether Blood Path. Do you see the violet-colored sun beneath the sky? As the Cyan Sparrow spoke, she gazed into the distance. That great purple sun shines on eternally. The Yellow Springs Blood Road is under that great sun alone. Lin Sun looked up and decided to take action. The ghastly netherworld was very large, and the scenery was strange. The sky, the earth, the mountains, and the rivers were all surrounded by wisps of cold and oppressive air, just like the real underworld. Walking in it, one might get lost and never find the way back if he was not careful. People under the Emperor realm didn't dare to wander here at all. However, with Cyan Sparrow guiding the way, Lin Sun wasn't afraid of going astray. Whoosh! With a flash of his figure, Lin Sun swept forward like a flowing rainbow. On the way, he frequently changed directions, passing through one strange and unpredictable place after another. He took twists and turns, as if he had fallen into a large maze. After a full hour, suddenly, a stone arch bridge appeared in Lin Sun's sight, stretching across the void to the depths of the gray mist. The bridge was paved with mottled bluestone, with carved guardrails on both sides. Under the bridge, clouds and mist lingered like rolling waves. Waves of foul and bloody smell diffused from the depths of the clouds and mist under the stone bridge, revealing a corrosive and fishy smell. Vaguely, there seemed to be a ghostly wail and wolf howl, which made people shudder. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help but be awestruck. The stone arch bridge and the surrounding scenery were full of strangeness and ominousness. It is said that this is the Bridge of Helplessness in the underworld of the Immortal Martial Era. Under the bridge, the River of Forgetfulness flows, and there is also a blood pool called the Blood River Pool. The Green Sparrow sent a voice transmission in a low voice. All specters that fall into the netherworld will have their memories erased after they pass through the Bridge of Helplessness, and then they'll be restrained in the netherworld to enter the cycle of reincarnation once more. If they have done too much evil in their lifetime and step on the Bridge of Helplessness, they will fall into the Blood River Pool and be immersed in it forever, suffering endless pain. It is said that on the east and west sides of the Bridge of Helplessness, there used to be a nether palace and a nether platform leading to the 18 levels of purgatory. But this is just a legend. No one dares to judge whether it is true or not. After all, these are some rumors of the last era, which can no longer be investigated. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be shocked. The Nether Palace, the River of Forgetfulness, the Nether Purgatory, the Blood River of the Dead. All of this sounded so inconceivable. If it really existed during the last era, then what sort of scene would it have been? Cyan Sparrow said, "Stepping on the Bridge of Helplessness is equivalent to stepping on the road to the Nether. You will encounter all kinds of dangers along the way. You should be prepared." Lin Sun nodded and took out the abyssal sword cauldron. Then, he stepped on the stone arch bridge. Walking on it, the blue stone under his feet was filled with the mottled air of time. Under the bridge, the smoke was steaming, emitting a unique aura of the underworld, cold and unusual. Lin Sun couldn't see what was in the depths of the mist under the bridge with his divine awareness. On the contrary, when he was investigating, his divine awareness felt extremely cold and depressed. Lin Sun suddenly noticed that the guardrails on both sides of the Bridge of Helplessness were carved with many vague patterns of cloud patterns. These patterns were extremely strange. There were burning bloody flowers covering the land, and muddy water of the Nether Palace flowing ceaselessly. There were various strict buildings engraved with strange inscriptions, which were marked with 6 paths, Nether Palace, 10 Great Yama, Pool of Reincarnation. There were hundreds of ghosts and scenes of purgatory. Although the scenes and cloud patterns had long been blurred, they still emitted a kind of shocking charm in this gloomy world. Lin Sun walked forward slowly and kept watching. He was more and more surprised. Could it be that these depictions are of the netherworld of the last era? Suddenly, the abyssal sword cauldron produced a strange fluctuation. The Nirvana order nurtured in it quietly turned into a lotus pattern at this moment, emerging and flowing with hundreds of millions of magnificent rays of light. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. Before he could react, the lotus pattern formed by the Nirvana order released a ray of order light, which gently swept across the guardrails on both sides of the Bridge of Helplessness. Lin Sun immediately saw all kinds of scenes about the netherworld, and the netherworld engraved on the guardrails were copied into the lotus pattern. How can your order power? Cyan Sparrow seemed to be shocked. Is it absorbing the origin power of the netherworld here? It seemed to be very uncalm and rarely lost its composure. Lin Sun immediately realized that it was the first time for Cyan Sparrow to encounter such a thing. At the same time, he couldn't help but wonder why the Nirvana order would take the initiative to copy these scenes. Could it be that there was a secret about the netherworld hidden in it? Have you ever heard of any grade of order power in this world that can achieve this? Lin Sun asked while observing. Cyan Sparrow said without hesitation, "I only dare to confirm one thing. This can't be produced by the Earth rank order. As for the Heaven rank order, it's hard to say." It was obvious that Cyan Sparrow was shocked and full of doubts. The immemorial downfall tribulation, a lone lotus blooming. How can the order of Mahasvara, that master, the master of the heart dimension, waited for so many years, be ordinary? Lin Sun thought in his heart, looks like I've underestimated the Nirvana order. Its secret is far from as simple as I thought. In fact, Lin Sun knew that with his current cultivation, he could merely control the Nirvana order and the Order Phoenix Flame, and he was utterly unable to understand the supreme secret within. This was called knowing how, but not knowing why. In this world, those who could comprehend and control the essence of order power were existences whose cultivation surpassed the progenitor realm. Lin Sun took a deep breath and continued forward. As he walked further and further on the Bridge of Helplessness, the lotus pattern formed by the Nirvana order ceaselessly copied the various scenes and patterns on both sides of the guardrails. It felt as if the Nirvana order regarded these scenes as a kind of power, and it was constantly refining them for its own use, supplementing and perfecting itself. This caused Lin Sun to be even more shocked. Along the way, Cyan Sparrow was also so shocked that her eyes widened and she couldn't even speak a word. She was knowledgeable and came from the immortal Emperor Yuan family, so she had seen many strange and incredible things. But it was also the first time that she saw the power of order could actually produce such a magical effect, and it was even active as if it had a spirit. After a full time of drinking a cup of tea, with a buzzing sound, the lotus pattern formed by the Nirvana order turned into a gray light and returned to the abyssal sword cauldron. At this time, Lin Sun suddenly noticed that he had come to the other side of the bridge of helplessness. This might be the reason why the Nirvana order returned to the abyssal sword cauldron. It's really mysterious. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. Since he started cultivating, it was the first time that he had seen the Nirvana order produce such a strange change. It was completely beyond his expectation. Science Sparrow, who had long been unable to restrain her inner doubts and curiosity, urged, after absorbing and refining so many imprints and patterns related to the netherworld, quickly see if there are any changes in your natal emperor weapon. Lin Sun's heart stirred, and he probed the abyssal sword cauldron with his divine sense. Chapter 25:19. The inside of abyssal sword cauldron was like an abyssal world, filled with chaotic air. A Taoist sword was floating in the chaos, bathed in the crystal-clear purple phoenix flame of order. Over the years, abyssal sword cauldron had absorbed nearly 10% of the power of the phoenix flame of order. Both its appearance and power had undergone earth-shaking changes. One day, when abyssal sword cauldron completely absorbed the phoenix flame of order, it would be able to transform into a divine weapon imprinted with the power of order. Of course, it was still too early. On the other side, the lotus pattern of Nirvana was floating, enshrouded in obscure and strange fluctuations of the Great Way. It didn't seem to have changed much. But when Lin Sun probed into it with his divine sense, he immediately noticed that the Nirvana order had changed. In the past, the Nirvana order contained the power of Nirvana freedom heaven, such as the world of samsara, the great wall of stars across the sky, and so on. And now, in the Nirvana order, there was an additional blurry netherworld palace. The netherworld was established on the vast land under the great wall of stars. There were Bridge of Helplessness, River of Forgetfulness, Blood River Pool, Road to the Underworld, 18 Purgatories, 10 Kings of Hell, 6 Paths of Hell. Every scene was very blurry, and some were even incomplete. But the aura it emitted was exactly the same as the netherworld chi that Lin Sun sensed on the Bridge of Helplessness. What's going on? Is the Nirvana order going to rebuild the netherworld? Lin Sun was surprised. Soon, he noticed that on the inner wall of abyssal sword cauldron there were strands of strange tadpole-like twisted Taoist patterns, which were looming, emitting the same aura as the netherworld. It should be known that abyssal sword cauldron was refined with the 9 emperors of Kunlun as the main material, which contained all kinds of incredible magical effects. And with the emergence of these strands of Taoist patterns that seemed to come from the netherworld, the appearance of abyssal sword cauldron also underwent a subtle change. Is this also a kind of order power? Lin Sun was lost in thought. Those strange Taoist patterns were very vague, but their aura was extremely amazing, which was not weaker than the phoenix flame of order. This made Lin Sun suspect that what was imprinted in these Taoist patterns was probably the power of order of the netherworld, but it was extremely weak and vague. How could the order power of the last era have a chance to survive? If there was a possibility of it reappearing in the world, it might be related to the Nirvana order. Thinking of this, Lin Sun's heart trembled as he realized a key: Nirvana. Didn't Nirvana mean reconstruction and rebirth? Could it be that this was the core magical effect of the Nirvana order? All of a sudden, Lin Sun thought of too many things. The order of Nirvana was born from the source energy of the ancient path of the starry sky, but it had disappeared for countless eons. His master, the master of the core dimension, had been waiting for countless eons. The path of an undying supreme being, nirvanic rebirth in the heavens, eternal oblivion tribulation, a single lotus blossoming. Lin Sun now knew that the Lone Lotus was him, but he didn't really understand what the immortal supremacy and nirvana of freedom were. Immortal, these two words were not casually called. This often represented a level that surpassed the ancestor realm. For example, the undying beings of the undying emperor clans. And what is this nirvana of freedom? It took a long time for Lin Sun to calm down. No matter what, he dared to conclude that the profundities of the rebirth order were bound to be extremely shocking. The abnormality of the nirvana order before was very likely to have obtained a netherworld rank. The power of order, and all this also caused subtle changes in his abyssal sword cauldron. This was Lin Sun's judgment. How is it? Cyan Sparrow looked at Lin Sun eagerly. Lin Sun said, there are indeed some subtle changes, but I'm not sure whether it's good or bad. Lin Sun didn't speak out his conjectures one by one. It was too shocking. Once Cyan Sparrow told the big shots of the immortal Emperor clan of Yuan. He didn't know what kind of storm it would cause. Humph! You must be hiding something. But I also know that this is your secret, so I don't want to ask. Cyan Sparrow snorted coldly, and you can rest assured that no matter what happens along the way, I'm just a guide. Everything about you, I will only tell my Mississippi. As for whether my miss will tell others, I don't know. Lin Sun smiled and thought that this might be one of the reasons why Yuan Qingheng left Cyan Sparrow here to show him the way. At this moment, the place where he stood was on the other side of the Bridge of Helplessness. It was another scene here, full of rolling black mist. A purple sun shone alone in the sky. Vaguely, a burning bright red path could be seen extending to the depths of the black mist. Next, you have to be careful. The soldiers, generals and kings of hell on the road to the underworld will appear at any time. If you're fast enough, you'll be able to pass through the gates of hell in about a month. The mysterious forbidden area that I told you about before is located near the gates of hell. If you really have the guts to go there, it won't be too late for me to remind you. Lin Sun nodded. However, he didn't act immediately. His eyes were like lightning, looking at the void on the other side, as if he had found something. It was silent here. Because it was too quiet, it seemed very abnormal. As Lin Sun's eyes swept over, he immediately understood why this place was abnormal. Because in this world that was covered in black fog, there were actually quite a few figures lying in ambush in the void within a radius of 500 kilometers. These figures were in groups of 3 or 5, which should belong to different forces. They were scattered in different directions. Lin Sun didn't know what secret method they used to hide in the space and completely hide their figures. They were like poisonous snakes hiding in the dark, so it was extremely difficult to detect them. Even the spiritual awareness couldn't detect their existence. If Lin Sun hadn't run the divine eye, which could see through the vanity and see through the vanity, he would have almost been deceived. But now everything was laid bare before his eyes, down to the slightest detail. In an instant, he saw that there were more than 30 people lying in ambush around, belonging to 7 forces. It was even to the extent that he clearly noticed that when the gazes of these people descended onto him, all of them revealed an imperceptible wisp of piercingly cold expressions, and it was like a group of wild beasts that had locked onto a lamb that had accidentally fallen into a trap. Looks like these fellows are all people that are trying to take advantage of others. Laying in ambush on the other side of the Bridge of Helplessness is indeed a superb position to ambush and kill. How could an ordinary person possibly notice the layer upon layer of killing intent lying in ambush within the black mist in the surroundings? Lin Sun's lips curled up with a hint of coldness. He guessed the intention of these people lying in ambush here. At the same time, it also let him know that many strong people had entered the Sunluo underworld from the realm of the dead long before him. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun followed the bright red road to the underworld and rushed into the depths of the black mist. Whoosh! Just after moving forward for less than a moment, a cold sword light suddenly pierced out from one side of his body. It seemed to appear out of thin air, tricky and vicious, and went straight to his back. Almost at the same time, on the other side of the void, several figures jumped out and attacked Lin Sun from different angles. Their movements were extremely fast, and their attacks were like lightning and thunder. Obviously, they intended to kill Lin Sun with one blow. In all directions, in the sky and on the ground, there was a terrible killing intent, which completely blocked Lin Sun's way of retreat like an inescapable net. If it was any other Emperor Realm expert here, they wouldn't be able to dodge this sudden attack and would be instantly killed. Their treasures would also be looted. In fact, all these robbers were extremely powerful. If they were weak, they could cross all the way from the ancient nightmare battlefield and the realm of the dead to here. Unfortunately, they chose the wrong target this time. Die. Lin Sun didn't move, but a terrible breath burst out of his body. The abyssal sword cauldron floating in front of him suddenly shone brightly. Boom! Like a hurricane, Lin Sun was the center, and the endless light turned into a big abyss that could devour the sky and the earth. It was merely a single strike, yet it directly crushed, and wiped out all the attacks that came from all directions. As if being struck by thunder, those robbers all shook violently and flew out fiercely, with blood spurting out of their mouths and noses. Before they could stand firm, an ancient and vast Taoist sword swept out of the abyssal sword cauldron and swept in the void. One sword of life and death. Countless brilliant, resplendent, and fierce strands of sword chi shot out violently from the Tao sword, and they transformed into a might that covered the heavens and the earth. They were dense like a violent storm, and they slashed open countless intersecting rifts in space. Those robbers had just suffered a heavy blow, and before they could stand firm, they were covered by countless sword chi. They didn't even have a chance to dodge. No! Damn it! In an instant, incomparably shrill cries resounded, and they seemed exceptionally horrifying in this world that was filled with surging black mist. After a while, these screams disappeared. All the emperors who had sneak attacked Lin Sun before were wiped out in body and soul. All the others that were hiding in the surrounding space gasped when they witnessed this scene, and their entire bodies felt cold. They instantly knew that this young man who'd come all alone was absolutely a formidable fellow that couldn't be offended, and his strength was terrifying to the extreme. Not even a ninth realm ancestor. No wonder you only dare to do some despicable and insidious sneak attacks. A trace of disdain flashed in Lin Sun's eyes. It was as if he had done something that couldn't be more normal. After killing these reckless things, he dusted off his clothes and continued on the Yellow Springs Road. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared in the vast black mist. Those robbers hiding in the void looked at each other, especially when they thought of the cold eyes cast by Lin Sun before he left, which still made their hearts palpitate. What kind of eyes was that? It was as cold as a knife, penetrating straight to the heart, like the eyes of a god overlooking ants, full of dignity that could not be provoked. Who was that guy? How could there be such a powerful figure in the world? Obviously, these strongmen might have arrived in the Sunluo underworld in advance, so they didn't know what happened to Wen Xiaoheng at all. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to regard Lin Sun as prey at all. P.S. The second and third chapters are here. Finished at about 10:30 in the evening. Library of Literature. Chapter 25-20. The color was as thick as burning blood, soaking through the endless dark red ground under his feet. In this vast and desolate area there was a road to the underworld. Everywhere else was shrouded in black fog. Even his divine sense could not see the scene in the black fog. Following Cyan Sparrow's instructions, Lin Sun did not teleport but galloped along the bloody road to the underworld. His speed was naturally incomparable to teleportation, but this was the safest and most reliable way. Along the way, Lin Sun could clearly feel the cold and violent aura of heaven and earth. It was filled with a bloody aura. It was like a place where the gods had spilled their blood, or an ancient battlefield. The air was filled with a bloody smell that made one's mind restless. If one's will was not firm enough, one might be triggered by the bloody smell and lose control of one's emotions, turning into a bloodthirsty lunatic. One might even suffer from chi deviation and destroy one's Taoist foundation. Even Lin Sun had to operate his cultivation to keep his mind and heart clear while moving forward vigilantly. Boom! Suddenly, a group of underworld soldiers rushed out of the thick black fog. They were riding on huge black fog horses. The eyes of the horses were black and corrosive black air was spewing out of their noses and mouth. Their aura was ferocious and violent. These underworld soldiers were covered in black armor, revealing only a pair of scarlet eyes that emitted a cold and ruthless luster. They were surrounded by black fog and each of them was well equipped. There were 13 of them and their aura was no weaker than a third-level Emperor Realm cultivator. But it felt like they were a single entity. Their aura was in harmony with each other and the ferocious aura they exuded was far beyond a third-level Emperor Realm cultivator. Kill! The group of underworld soldiers roared in unison. An unparalleled murderous aura spread from their bodies and stirred up the area. Rumble, the warhorses under them strode forward and actually moved through the void. In an instant, they arrived in front of Lin Sun and stomped down hard on Lin Sun. The underworld soldiers on the horses stabbed out with their black spears. The spears were as sharp as lightning and emitted a terrifying aura that crushed and collapsed the void. What was more terrifying was that they were releasing a mysterious power of great way. Under such a fierce attack, Lin Sun remained calm. The abyssal sword cauldron roared and rushed out, flowing with hundreds of millions of magnificent lights of the Great Way. Amidst intense rumbling, the 13 nether soldiers and their horses were crushed into pieces at this moment, and they transformed into surging black-colored mist that was completely devoured by the abyssal sword cauldron. With a single strike, he annihilated the group of enemies as easily as breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. However, Lin Sun was stunned. He had intended to probe the details of the netherworld soldier and the mysteries of the power it controlled with reservation in this strike. Who would have thought that the opponent would be blasted apart like a piece of paper? One must know that even a third-level martial emperor would not be this weak. The combined strength of these underworld soldiers far surpassed a third-level martial emperor. But now they had been wiped out just like that. It's the power of the netherworld collected by the abyssal sword cauldron. Soon, Lin Sun noticed that in the abyssal sword cauldron, wisps of strange Taoist patterns with the aura of the netherworld were flickering and looming. After devouring the black-colored mist dispersed by the 13 nether soldiers, these strange Taoist patterns were still blurry, but they were obviously clearer. Lin Sun counted that there were 81 strange Taoist patterns in total, and each of them exuded an aura that belonged to the netherworld. It seems that after possessing these strange Taoist patterns, the abyssal sword cauldron also has a natural power to restrain the nether soldiers. Only in this way can it defeat those nether soldiers so easily. Lin Sun understood. He temporarily called this power the netherworld force. He called those Taoist patterns the netherworld Taoist patterns. And the netherworld, that was absorbed and derived by the Nirvana order, was called the netherworld order. Your natal emperor weapon has really become different. Cyan Sparrow sighed with emotion, as if she could see through some of the mysteries even if Lin Sun didn't tell her. Lin Sun smiled and continued to move forward. Not long after, he encountered another group of nether soldiers. This time, there were more than 30 of them, and each of them was ferocious and murderous. Faced with such a situation, ordinary Emperor Realm figures would definitely flee immediately and not dare to fight. But since Lin Sun already knew the magical effect of the abyssal sword cauldron, how could he miss such an opportunity? Boom! The abyssal sword cauldron swept out. In just a few blinks of an eye, all the nether soldiers were killed, and the rolling black-colored mist after their death was swallowed by the abyssal sword cauldron. Lin Sun noticed at once that the 81 netherworld Taoist patterns in the abyssal sword cauldron were obviously more solid. In particular, one of the netherworld Taoist patterns showed a faint sign of becoming clear and complete. With the change of the netherworld Taoist patterns, the power of the netherworld force released by the abyssal sword cauldron was also improved. This kind of harvest made Lin Sun excited. He couldn't help but look forward to what kind of transformation would happen when the 81 netherworld Taoist patterns became clear and complete. Soon, Lin Sun set out again. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. As time went by, Lin Sun was frequently attacked by nether soldiers along the way, ranging from 4 or 5 to dozens of them. Lin Sun naturally didn't hold back when facing such prey that came to him, and he used the abyssal sword cauldron to annihilate all of them. As it absorbed more and more energy, 5 of the 81 netherworld Taoist patterns within the abyssal sword cauldron had already become complete and clearly visible after 3 days of changes. They were like 5 lifelike fish that were filled with mysterious and unfathomable intelligence, and they were far from something other netherworld Taoist patterns could compare to. On the other hand, the might of the abyssal sword cauldron to crush the nether soldiers had become even more terrifying, and it revealed an absolutely overwhelming strength. That fellow wouldn't be the great emperor from an eternal emperor clan, right? A group of figures followed Lin Sun from afar on the nether path behind him. During these 3 days, they didn't encounter any attacks while following behind Lin Sun, and it was equivalent to avoiding all sorts of dangers. This was naturally because of Lin Sun. He was equivalent to a vanguard that blazed a path through all the obstacles for these cultivators at the back. However, at the same time that they gained an extremely great advantage, these cultivators were shocked by the strength Lin Sun revealed, and their minds were unable to calm down. At this moment, their mental states had changed, and they were filled with reverence and fear towards Lin Sun. No matter who he is, he's a peerlessly ferocious figure that we can't afford to offend. Someone spoke in a serious voice. Watch your words. We've taken advantage of that fellow Taoist all along the way, and it's even to the extent that it's very likely that he'd noticed our tracks a long time ago, yet he didn't care about it. Obviously, he couldn't be bothered to make a fuss about it with us. A figure of the senior generation spoke in a low voice. I have a suggestion. If that fellow Taoist encounters any troublesome danger on the way, then we should lend him a hand as well. These words obtained the agreement of everyone. Lin Sun had naturally noticed the tracks of these cultivators a long time ago, but he paid no attention to them when he saw that they were only following from afar and didn't reveal any ill intent. Just like this, they traveled on the nether path for an entire 7 days. The slaughter all along the way allowed another 7 complete netherworld Taoist patterns amongst the 81 netherworld Taoist patterns within the abyssal sword cauldron. Coupled with the netherworld Taoist patterns from before, there were already 12 complete netherworld Taoist patterns. This kind of harvest made Lin Sun's slaughter along the way no longer boring. Instead, it was filled with a sense of expectation for continuous harvest. However, in the following day, they gained nothing and didn't encounter a single netherworld soldier. Lin Sun couldn't help frowning at this abnormal scene. Could it be that someone had already swept away all the netherworld soldiers on the way ahead of time? It was very likely. It should be known that there was only one nether path, and it was no more than 300 meters wide. If there was a group of experts walking ahead, the netherworld soldiers they encountered along the way would naturally be swept away by these experts. For other Emperor Realm experts, walking behind others without any danger was undoubtedly equivalent to taking advantage of it. It was a fortunate thing, but for Lin Sun it seemed a little bad, because it meant that he could no longer collect enough power to make the netherworld Taoist patterns transform. How could he be happy? Immediately, Lin Sun quickened his pace. Very soon, Lin Sun suddenly noticed that there was a chaotic and intense battle coming from the depths of the dark mist in the distance. There seemed to be a great battle taking place there. Sure enough, Lin Sun completely verified his speculation. Swoosh! In the next moment, he transformed into a ray of light that flashed towards the area where the fluctuations of the battle arose. Kill! The intense sounds of battle shot into the sky and surged through the wind and clouds, and it was like the roars of fiend gods. Kill! Numerous terrifying Tao arts were mixed within the various magic treasures as they charged through the heavens and the earth, and they erupted with blazing and dazzling light that illuminated the world. Kill! Numerous Emperor Realm figures fought through the heavens and the earth. Obviously, they were from the same camp and were fighting side by side. The scene before his eyes seemed like an extremely intense battlefield. Fresh blood sprayed violently, magic treasures flew about, and terrifying Tao arts rumbled through the heavens and the earth and erupted with boundless light. When Lin Sun rushed over, he witnessed such a scene, and he couldn't help but be shocked as he sensed the horrifying aura that assaulted his face. Shockingly, the opponents of those Emperor Realm experts were an army of Netherworld soldiers led by a Nether general. There were over 1,000 of them, and they rode war horses as they charged through the surging black mist. The Nether general was the most terrifying. His armor flowed with a scarlet-red glow of the Tao, and he held a black halberd in his hand. Moreover, he emanated ferocious might that caused the surroundings to dim. At the very least, he was equivalent to a 9th realm martial ancestor. On the other hand, the army of Netherworld soldiers weren't weak as well. When they converged together, their auras fused together, and they cooperated tacitly with each other. As they fought, they seemed to have formed an enormous slaughter formation. Every single Netherworld soldier was ferocious and unafraid of death. Every single charge was boundlessly terrifying, and it seemed as if they were capable of slashing space into pieces and overturning the world. If it was just a few tens of Netherworld soldiers, then it would naturally be much easier to deal with. However, the scene before their eyes was one where there were over 1,000 Netherworld soldiers. They formed a dense mass that covered the heavens and the earth, and it was sufficient to cause the scalps of any Emperor Realm expert to go numb. Coupled with the presence of a Nether general, even a 9th realm martial ancestor might not be able to annihilate all of them no matter how exhausted they were, and it was even to the extent that they might be exhausted to death. P.S. The 4th update is here. The eruption is complete. Yes, I finally dare to weekly ask for monthly votes now. Chapter 25-21. Compared to the army of Nether soldiers, there were only over 20 martial emperors. They were like a wave in the ocean, extremely inconspicuous. But even then, no one retreated. Instead, they charged forward with all their might. Lin Sun noticed that even though there weren't many martial emperors, there was Great Emperor Juing and 3 9th realm ancestors. 2 of the 9th realm ancestors were fighting intensely with the Nether general. The other 9th realm ancestor was guarding by Great Emperor Juying's side, and he led a group of martial emperors to charge forward in the army of Nether soldiers. Obviously, they didn't want to fight to the death with this terrifying army of Nether soldiers. They just wanted to kill their way out of the encirclement and go deeper into the Nether Spring Road. However, it was extremely difficult for this group of martial emperors to kill their way out of the encirclement in a short period of time. The reason was very simple. There were too many Nether soldiers, and they didn't fear death. They charged forward wave after wave, causing these martial emperors to find it difficult to move forward. In the battle with the Nether general, even though the 2 9th realm ancestors fought with all their might, they could only restrain the Nether general, and they couldn't kill it. Lin soon noticed that the supreme figure at the center was a man in plain clothes. His purple hair hung down, and he held a golden jade ruler in his hand. His attacks were extremely ferocious and overbearing, and he was extremely valiant. The man in plain clothes was at the 6th level of the martial emperor realm. His entire body glowed brilliantly, and he was rather handsome. When his eyes opened and closed, a pair of mysterious yin and yang fish surged into appearance. It was profound, unfathomable, and extremely terrifying. Even though he was in a tight encirclement and it was difficult for him to move forward, There wasn't any seriousness on his face. Instead, he revealed a trace of impatience. It was as if he was tired of this battle that felt like he was stuck in a swamp. This allowed Lin Sun to determine that the man in plain clothes should possess a powerful trump card that was sufficient to deal with the predicament before him. The reason why he hadn't used it was probably because he wasn't willing to waste it on such an opponent. As expected, as if he wanted to verify Lin Sun's guess, it wasn't long before a green bamboo slip that emitted a thick and boundless aura appeared in the man's hand. Hesitation could be seen on his face. Obviously, the value of the green bamboo slip was so great that he was slightly reluctant to use it. Seeing this, Lin Sun didn't hesitate to charge forward and activate the Abyssal Sword Cauldron. Boom! The Abyssal Sword Cauldron, which was wrapped in dazzling Dao light, smashed towards the densely packed underworld soldiers with a deafening roar. Bang bang bang! As the Abyssal Sword Cauldron descended, it was like a divine mountain falling from the sky, smashing 7 or 8 netherworld soldiers and their war horses into pieces on the spot. The plain-clothed man and the others were shocked by this scene, and they looked over in succession. When they noticed Lin Sun's appearance, they couldn't help being stunned. What was going on? Someone dared to come to their rescue in such a dangerous battle? Being saved by someone was, of course, a moving matter. However, seeing that Lin Sun came alone and looked very strange, it was completely beyond the expectation of the plain-clothed man that Lin Sun would take such a big risk to participate in the battle. He was a little confused. Since when did the vast 1,000 battle domains have such a chivalrous and warm-hearted person? Young master, could it be that this guy saw through your identity and deliberately came to curry favor with you? Someone muttered. The plain-clothed man was startled and said, "He risked his life to help us. Who would dare to curry favor with me and risk his life like this person?" Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Indeed, while they were talking, there was another thunderous roar in the distance. Then, as Lin Sun attacked, the Abyssal Sword Cauldron continued to kill. Wherever it passed, groups of netherworld soldiers were crushed and their bodies exploded, turning into rolling black mist. The plain-clothed man and the others were dumbfounded by the devastating scene. This person is actually a peerless great emperor. No wonder he dares to risk his life to come here. Someone exclaimed. Killing netherworld soldiers like tearing a painting, it's too incredible. Indeed too fierce. Who is this person? Why haven't I heard of him? The plain-clothed man's pupils flashed and his heart shook. The power of a netherworld soldier was not worth mentioning, but when hundreds or thousands of netherworld soldiers gathered together to charge, it could be said to be terrifying. Otherwise, their group wouldn't have been trapped here. Therefore, when he saw Lin Sun's irresistible killing power, the plain-clothed man could not help but be moved. How could such a person be an ordinary person? How could such a person take the initiative to curry favor with him? Let's attack together, attack with all our strength. The plain-clothed man took a deep breath and gave the order. Everyone roared in agreement. Lin Sun's appearance was like a sharp awl, piercing into the army of netherworld soldiers and stirring up the situation of the entire battlefield. As a result, many netherworld soldiers rushed towards Lin Sun like a tide. This was equivalent to sharing a lot of pressure for the plain-clothed man and the others. Naturally, they understood that this was undoubtedly the best time to break out. As for Lin Sun, the harvest this time could be said to be huge. He was happy, and he displayed all his skills to constantly kill. In the eyes of others, those netherworld soldiers were troublesome and difficult to deal with, but in his eyes, they were undoubtedly tempting prey, waiting to be hunted by him. Kill! At this moment, the netherworld general that was fighting intensely with the 2 Ninth Realm ancestors in the distance noticed that something was wrong with the situation, and it noticed Lin Sun's existence. He let out an obscure and explosive shout. Instantly, practically all the netherworld soldiers in the surroundings charged towards Lin Sun. The plain-clothed man and the others seized this opportunity to charge out of the heavy encirclement in one go, and all of them were in high spirits. When they looked back, they saw Lin Sun charging into the battlefield by himself, and the dense mass of Netherworld soldiers seemed as if they were fearless of death as they charged towards him. "Young master, leave quickly," someone reminded swiftly. They'd already killed their way out of the heavy encirclement, and it was very likely that variables would arise if they still didn't leave. However, the plain-clothed man grunted coldly and said, "If it wasn't for the assistance of that fellow Taoist, how could we possibly have the chance to kill our way out of the heavy encirclement? No matter if he did it for the sake of helping us or not, at this moment, I, Tantai Feng, can't watch helplessly as he fights alone." His words were sonorous, forceful, and powerful. Everyone was astounded. Before they could persuade him, the plain-clothed man had already pointed at the Netherworld general in the distance and said, "To capture the followers, we must first capture the leader. Let's go together and help the two elders kill that Netherworld general. Perhaps we'll be able to resolve this trap." As soon as he finished speaking, a loud shout resounded from afar. "Everyone, it's best that you leave quickly. Don't cause unnecessary trouble. I, Ling Xuanzi, naturally have a way to kill our way out. Quickly! Don't hesitate, leave quickly!" The voice revealed an urging tone. This was naturally spoken by Lin Sun because he didn't want those Netherworld soldiers to be seized by the plain-clothed man's group. The plain-clothed man couldn't help but be stunned. This fellow is actually refusing to help? The others seemed as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders, and they persuaded. "Young master, that fellow Taoist over there has already said it. This opportunity isn't easy to come by, so we should leave quickly. The Nether Springs path is filled with danger, and we must preserve our strength in order to kill our way out alive and arrive before the first eternal Imperial Pass." The plain-clothed man hesitated for a moment, and then he raised his eyes to look at Lin Sun, who was on the battlefield, and asked in a clear voice, "Fellow Taoist Ling Xuanzi, may I ask why you're helping us?" Lin Sun fought as he spoke righteously. "I don't have any other ability, and I just like to help others." Some people almost spat and they had strange gazes. If it wasn't for Lin Sun having indeed helped them greatly, they would have almost started scolding him. "What do you mean help others? We're all Emperor Realm figures that have lived for countless years, all right? Who are you trying to deceive with such a childish and laughable reason?" The plain-clothed man's expression became strange as well, and the corners of his mouth twitched. After a short while he said, "Fellow Taoist that? Leave quickly." Lin Sun interrupted him bluntly. The plain-clothed man didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Could it be that this fellow really isn't afraid of death? "Young master, since this person is so chivalrous and willing to help others, then what are we waiting for? Let's just leave." Suddenly, the two Ninth Realm ancestors that had been fighting the Netherworld general in the distance had flashed over explosively, and they left with the plain-clothed man without hesitation at all. The plain-clothed man was just about to refuse, yet he'd been crowded away a long time ago. He couldn't help but turn around and say loudly, "Fellow Taoist Ling Xuanzi, I, Tantai Feng, will remember this kindness. If we meet again in the future, I'll definitely treat you to some wine." His voice was still reverberating, but they'd already left. Lin Sun's gaze was slightly strange as well. This Tantai Feng really does have some conscience. Bang! A terrifying aura of slaughter whistled over as the Netherworld general charged over explosively. Lin Sun didn't dare think too much about it, and he discarded all distracting thoughts as he swung the abyssal sword cauldron and fought with all his might. Even though he was alone, he actually revealed an invincible bearing. 100, 150, 200. As the battle continued, more and more Netherworld soldiers were killed by Lin Sun, and the black mist they devoured was like an endless stream that flowed ceaselessly into the abyssal sword cauldron. Such a harvest caused Lin Sun's fighting spirit to rise even more. He wasn't in a hurry to kill the Netherworld General because he was worried that once the Netherworld General died, the Netherworld soldiers that had lost control would scatter like monkeys when a tree falls, and that wouldn't be worth it. 300, 400, 500. Looking from afar, the black mist surged as the battle shook the heavens, and wave after wave of Netherworld soldiers fell beneath Lin Sun's slaughter as if he was harvesting crops. So strong! He's too abnormal. He clearly had the chance to kill his way out of the encirclement, yet he didn't do so. Could it be that he intends to annihilate this entire army of Netherworld soldiers? How could such a ferocious and ruthless person exist in this world? At this moment, all the cultivators that were following behind Lin Sun had witnessed the scenes that were occurring on the battlefield, and for a time, all of them were flabbergasted while their hearts shook. Didn't we say earlier that if that fellow Taoist encountered any troublesome danger, then we would head over to help as well? Are we going over now? Someone couldn't help but ask. There's no need. Before all of them could recover from their shock, Lin Sun's loud shout resounded from afar. If all of you still intend to follow him all the way, then don't interfere. Just these words alone caused all those cultivators to be almost dumbstruck. They were even refused to help. How could such a person exist in this world? Chapter 25-22. Lin Sun didn't care what those practitioners thought. He had a premonition that when he killed all these Netherworld soldiers and Netherworld generals, it was extremely likely that the 81 Netherworld Tao markings within the Abyssal Sword Cauldron would undergo a tremendous transformation. Kill, kill, kill. On the battlefield, the Abyssal Sword Cauldron glowed. Every time it swept out, it would kill 7 or 8 Netherworld soldiers. The sword chi that shot out from the cauldron was incomparably sharp, killing the Netherworld soldiers as if they were grass. That Netherworld general had noticed that the situation was bad a long time ago, and it had struggled to flee many times. However, it was firmly suppressed by Lin Sun every single time, and Lin Sun didn't give it any chance to flee at all. At the end of the battle, Lin Sun even felt that he was a little slow. He immediately released the 5 Tao forms to fight alongside himself. The effect was obvious. His battle record began to skyrocket. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the Nether soldiers in the surroundings had been completely wiped out. At this moment, Lin Sun finally stopped holding back and annihilated the Netherworld general with a single strike. Bang! When the huge and burly figure of the Underworld general exploded, a copious amount of black smoke spread out. The Abyssal Sword Cauldron took a few breaths of time to completely devour the black smoke that the Underworld general had transformed into. Right at this moment, all the cultivators that had fallen into a dumbstruck and shocked state had suddenly returned to their senses. When they saw Lin Sun standing alone on the deserted battlefield with no enemies, they were all stiff and shocked. A majestic army of Netherworld soldiers and a Netherworld general had actually been annihilated by that fellow alone. Who could have imagined this before? At this time, Lin Sun exhaled a long breath of turbid chi. He began to look at the Abyssal Sword Cauldron while refining the divine medicine to replenish his lost physical strength. Inside the Abyssal Sword Cauldron, the 81 Netherworld Tao patterns were all condensed to a complete state after absorbing the boundless Netherworld energy. Every single one of them was clearly visible and radiated a type of spirituality. Moreover, this transformation was still ongoing. Later on, the 81 Netherworld Tao markings started to wriggle incessantly and fuse together. In the end, they fused into 9 completely new Netherworld Tao markings. Every single Netherworld Tao marking revealed a different aura, and it emanated a different aura. Some were as cold as ice, bone-piercing cold. Some were violent and ostentatious, like a raging fire. Some emitted a corrosive charm. The 9 Tao patterns were like 9 branches of the Netherworld law, and together, they formed the complete Netherworld profundity. However, it was still very blurry. When Lin Sun sensed it with his divine awareness, he found that each of these 9 new netherworld Tao patterns showed a kind of fragmented, mottled, incomplete and vague characteristic. Could it be that I still need to condense it further before I can refine these 9 netherworld Tao patterns to a perfect state? Lin Sun was lost in thought. Even so, he still discovered that when the 9 netherworld Tao markings were condensed, the abyssal sword cauldron also underwent an obvious change, and there was an additional mysterious charm to it. At a glance, it was like the entrance to the netherworld, and it had a mysterious color that caused one's heart to palpitate. After a while, Lin Sun casually turned over his hand, and a pigeon egg-sized bead appeared in his palm. It was gloomy and turbid, and there seemed to be a river flowing in it, emitting a chilling aura. The Underworld Pearl. It was a precious treasure that only netherworld generals possessed, and it had unbelievable effects in refining Emperor weapons. In the Eternal World, it could be exchanged for 300,000 first-class Eternity Source crystals. According to Cyan Sparrow, those who possessed the Underworld Pearl would rarely sell it. The reason was that this treasure was extremely rare, and it could only be obtained in the Dark Underworld. After thinking for a moment, Lin Sun put away the Underworld Pearl, and he intended to properly study the effects of this pearl after he gathered enough. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd of cultivators on the path behind him, and then he continued moving forward. "What are you standing there for? Let's go." Those cultivators seemed as if they'd awoken from a dream, and they hurriedly chased after him. 3 days later. It was the 14th day since Lin Sun stepped onto the Underworld Road. He saw Tantai Feng and his group again. The funny thing was that Tantai Feng's group was trapped by an army of netherworld soldiers this time, and there were an entire 2 netherworld generals and over 1,000 netherworld soldiers. When Lin Sun arrived, Tantai Feng's group noticed him as well, and they couldn't help but reveal surprised expressions. They seemed to have never expected that this chivalrous, courageous, and willing to help others fellow was actually still alive. "Hey! Brother, quickly come and help." Someone couldn't help but cry out loudly, and he called Lin Sun a good person with a sarcastic tone. Tantai Feng frowned and berated, "Don't blame me for being merciless if you dare speak nonsense again." Lin Sun smiled in the distance, and he paid no attention to all of this. His figure flickered as he charged directly towards a netherworld general in the distance. Tantai Feng couldn't help but be stunned when he saw this. This fellow wouldn't be willing to help others again, right? All the others by his side had strange expressions because even they hadn't expected that Lin Sun would actually sacrifice himself and stand out once more under such circumstances. While they were pondering, Lin Sun had already entered into an intense battle with the netherworld general. In merely a short moment, the netherworld general was annihilated, and at the same time that Lin Sun obtained an underworld pearl, it allowed the abyssal sword cauldron to absorb extremely surging netherworld energy. In the distance, another netherworld general was in battle with 2 ninth realm martial ancestors. Lin Sun shook his head when he saw this, and he abandoned the thought of seizing the prey before turning around and charging towards the distance. He didn't intend to stay here any longer. All along the way, he'd already tested that the netherworld energy gathered by hunting netherworld soldiers was practically negligible to the abyssal sword cauldron. This allowed him to realize that if he wanted the 9 netherworld Tao markings to continue transforming, then he could only hunt and kill netherworld generals. At this moment, the reason Lin Sun gave up on hunting and killing the other netherworld general was because those 2 ninth realm martial ancestors were present as well. Once he interfered and killed the netherworld general, then who would the underworld pearl that was left behind belong to? Instead of causing unnecessary trouble, Lin Sun might as well give up. He intended to hurry on with his journey and strive to surpass Tantai Feng's group. In this way, he would be able to seize the initiative when he encountered another netherworld general. "Wait, brother, you're trying to leave first," someone cried out strangely. Many people noticed this as well, and they couldn't help but frown. In this battlefield, they'd attracted the main force of the netherworld soldiers. In this way, it would be comparatively easier for Lin Sun to leave. This was the same logic as 3 days ago. With Lin Sun holding back the Netherworld soldiers, they were able to easily kill their way out. However, Lin Sun leaving just like that caused those people to feel unbalanced in their hearts. Why should we hold back the enemy's forces and let this fellow seize the opportunity to leave? We didn't say that we should be willing to help others like him. Someone grunted coldly. Let's go. Let's charge over together. We can't let him take advantage of us like that. Someone egged on. Tantai Feng couldn't help but be furious, and his gaze was cold. Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? No matter what, Ling Xuanzi has helped us in the end, and he even killed a Netherworld general earlier. Yet all of you say such shameless words. You've lost all my faith. His furious words caused those people's expressions to change, and they went silent out of fear. In the distance, the voice of a Ninth Realm ancestor who was fighting a Netherworld general sounded out. Young master is right. Ling Xuanzi's combat strength is so terrifying to be able to easily kill a Netherworld general amidst an army. It's far from something an ordinary peak great emperor can compare to. How can such a figure be slandered? This caused Tantai Feng's expression to ease up greatly, and he said, "Continue fighting. I've already said that everything we encountered along the way was a rare form of tempering. If it wasn't for that, I could very well utilize my trump card and kill all these enemies before me. But in that way, I'd lose the opportunity to temper myself." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand and led everyone to continue fighting. Lin Sun, who'd killed his way out of the encirclement a long time ago, heard their conversation, and he couldn't help but look at Tantai Feng in a different light. He didn't need to be grateful, and it was enough as long as he knew how to reason. Unfortunately, most people in this world didn't possess such a bearing like Tantai Feng. Swoosh! Lin Sun's figure quickly vanished on the Yellow Springs path that was covered by the boundless black mist. On the other hand, all the cultivators who followed behind him were dumbfounded and felt bitter. They didn't have such great ability to kill their way out of the encirclement of this army of Netherworld soldiers. In this way, it was equivalent to them losing the opportunity to follow behind Lin Sun and be protected all the way. Alas, we're finished. Many people sighed. We've only met by chance, and we're neither relatives nor friends. We've already taken advantage of him all along the way, and it's already a great kindness to be protected by that fellow Taoist until now. An old man frowned and said in a low voice, "If you continue to push your luck and don't know how to be grateful, then it won't be justifiable." Instantly, everyone fell silent. "Come on, let's go kill the enemies. Helping others at this time is helping ourselves. Don't hold the illusion of taking advantage of him." The old man waved his hand and charged towards the battlefield. The others glanced at each other, gritted their teeth, and charged over as well. Just as the old man said, only by fighting side by side with Tantai Feng and the others would they have a chance to continue moving forward. Otherwise, no one would be able to pass through this calamity. When Tantai Feng saw this scene, he was even more moved. Since when did there appear so many good people in this world? All of you like to help others? Tantai Feng couldn't help but ask. The group of emperors was stunned, and then the old man in the lead said in a clear voice, "Although we're not talented, we're willing to follow fellow Taoist Ling Xuanzi's actions." Sure enough, Tantai Feng couldn't help but feel excited, and he said, "Rest assured, with me here, I, Tantai Feng, will definitely not let any of you be in danger." If Lin Sun saw this scene, he would probably be dumbfounded as well. After all, the reason why he was willing to help others wasn't pure. But obviously, Tantai Feng should have been moved by it, of course. All of this had nothing to do with Lin Sun. On the boundless Netherworld road, he flew at an extremely fast speed. Along the way, he encountered some Netherworld soldiers, but he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them and directly avoided them. Now, only Netherworld general-level characters could enter Lin Sun's eyes. P.S. Thank you for your monthly votes since yesterday. Although there won't be a lot of updates today, there will be more. Updates will be added at around 10 p.m. Chapter 25-23. Half a month passed in a hurry. Along the way, Lin Sun had encountered dozens of raids, but most of them were from hordes of ghost soldiers. The number of ghost generals was very small. In half a month, Lin Sun only killed 5 of them. He got 5 underworld beads and the surging power of the underworld. Now, the 9 netherworld Tao patterns in the abyssal sword cauldron had become much more condensed and showed signs of being complete. They were no longer as chaotic and fuzzy as they were at the beginning. Lin Sun didn't expect such a great harvest before he entered the Sunluo underworld. With my current combat strength, I'm no longer a threat to those at the 9th realm. Perhaps when I reach the 7th realm of the Void Tempering Realm, I'll be able to see if I can fight against the one Tao ancestor. In addition, the power of the Abyssal Sword Cauldron has obviously improved a lot, which is enough to match my current combat power. Lin Sun comprehended the changes in his cultivation as he hurried along. And the Great Furnace Scripture has integrated half of the power of inheritance, but there is still a long way to go before it can really contain all kinds of Tao and develop all kinds of laws. Over the years, the 5 doppelgangers had been comprehending and integrating all kinds of power of inheritance in Lin Sun. It was not a big deal to just integrate them. On the basis of integration, opening up a new path and turning it into his own use was the goal. This was to carry on the past and open up the future. Up to now, in addition to the 5 Supreme Sword Scripture, Taishan Sword Scripture, No Return, etc., dozens of power of inheritance, such as Dongxian Green Lotus, Scripture of Herbs in Heaven, Scripture of Tranquility in Tripitaka, and so on, were constantly being integrated into a part of the Great Furnace Scripture. This was the Scripture. Only with a complete Emperor's Scripture, and the help of one's cultivation, could one have the ability to comprehend immortality when he was in the Ancestor realm. The most important thing now is to break through the realm. Only by breaking through the realm can I go further and live longer in the vast 1,000 battlefields. Otherwise, once I meet the ancestor of one Tao, I can only run away. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with determination. Presently, his cultivation had already attained the extremes of the perfection stage of the heavenly lawless realm, and he only lacked a critical factor to advance to the void refinement realm. At that time, the increase in his cultivation would cause his combat strength to undergo a complete transformation. The gates of hell are not far ahead. Suddenly, Cyan Sparrow reminded. Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. He abandoned all distracting thoughts and looked up. In the extremely distant black mist, there was a faint image of an enormous door. It connected the sky above and the earth below. Although it was faintly discernible, it seemed extremely lofty and mysterious. Gates of Hell. It was rumored that the Nether Realm was a terrifying place in the underworld. Once one entered this place, one's soul would not return. Of course, this was a rumor that only occurred during the last era. When Lin Sun approached it carefully, he saw that the gate of hell was actually a huge black gate, like a gate of heaven across heaven and earth. The stone pillars on both sides were several hundred meters thick, and the stone pillars were inscribed with mottled patterns of clouds. After experiencing the corrosion of countless years, they had long been damaged and incomplete. And on the beam of the door that was extremely high up, there were 2 large words inscribed with strange black Tao runes. Hellgate. Just looking at it would cause one's heart to palpitate. Once you enter this gate, you will not only be attacked by the underworld soldiers and generals, but you will also be attacked by the Een Thunder of the 6 clans. Cyan Sparrow reminded. The so-called Een Thunder of the 6 clans referred to 6 types of thunderbolts that were filled with strange power. It was rumored that only the netherworld would produce such a terrible disaster. These 6 types of thunderbolts were Azura Blood Thunder, Absolute Thunder of Destiny, Human Soul Thunder, Evil Spirit Thunder, Hell Thunder, and Animal True Thunder. Azura, Destiny, Human Soul, evil spirit, hell, and animal corresponded to the 6 clans of the Netherworld in the last era. Then, Cyan Sparrow gave Lin Sun some advice on the terror of the Een thunder of the 6 clans. Lin Sun almost laughed out loud when he heard that even emperors would be struck by the animal true thunder, unable to recover their true form. Thinking about it, a group of Emperor Realm figures suddenly turned into livestock like pigs, cows, and sheep. This scene was absolutely amazing. Lin Sun could not help but recall the scene when she once turned a group of sages into a flock of sheep in the ancient Desolation domain. Don't laugh. If you become an animal, I'm afraid you won't be able to cry even if you want to, Cyan Sparrow snorted coldly. Lin Sun was stunned, and a layer of goosebumps appeared all over his body. If that was really the case, just thinking about it made his hair stand on end. By the way, didn't you say that there is a mysterious forbidden area near the gates of hell? Lin Sun thought of something. Cyan Sparrow said, after entering the gates of hell, there is a broken tablet with 2 words Yama written on it. The mysterious forbidden area is deep in the east of the tablet. Yama? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. What kind of danger is in that mysterious forbidden area? A kind of order power that also collapsed and exploded after the destruction of the last era. It is like a burning black flame, immortal and indestructible. It is also called Nirvana Fire of Order. Cyan Sparrow said in a low voice, in the past, there was a real ancestor of one Tao who went there to investigate, but he encountered unknown dangers. At the moment he escaped, his whole body was covered by the Nirvana Fire of Order. In the blink of an eye, his soul was destroyed and turned into ashes. It is also because of this that people realized that the danger in this mysterious forbidden area is enough to kill the ancestor of one Tao. Lin Sun could not help but be shocked and narrowed his eyes. Since it is so dangerous, why do you still suggest me to go there? Because there are 2 kinds of order power in your life weapon, which is enough to resist the power of the Nirvana Fire of Order. If you can collect some of this fire, you can even threaten the immortals. As soon as Cyan Sparrow said this, Lin Sun could not help but be moved. Only then did he realize what opportunity Cyan Sparrow mentioned. Cyan Sparrow continued, of course, this is just my speculation. It doesn't matter if you really don't want to go. After all, that damn place is really too dangerous. Lin Sun's eyes flickered. After a moment of silence, he said, let's go and have a look first. He started to walk towards the gates of hell. When his figure had just arrived before the gates of hell, the order of Nirvana within the abyssal sword cauldron suddenly appeared. After that, it released a gorgeous rain of Nirvana light that covered the enormous stone pillars on both sides and the extremely high beams of the door. It has discovered another energy that can be absorbed and refined? Cyan Sparrow was stunned. Lin Sun was slightly surprised as well, but he quickly felt anticipation in his heart. Not long after, the Order of Nirvana withdrew its light and returned to the abyssal sword cauldron. Lin Sun's divine sense entered it right away, and he sensed it slightly. Instantly, he saw that within the world of the Order of Nirvana, there was a gates of hell that connected the 9 heavens and the 9 underworlds within the netherworld. Obviously, the energy that was absorbed and refined by the Order of Nirvana earlier was a part of the netherworld. However, there wasn't much change to the abyssal sword cauldron this time. Only one of the 9 netherworld Tao markings had instantly become complete and clear. When Lin Sun sensed it, a strange profundity of the great Tao instantly surged into his heart. After a long time, Lin Sun finally understood that this netherworld Tao marking was branded with a complete netherworld grand Tao, and it was called the Soul Retraction Tao. This Tao was divided into 2 parts, Soul Retraction and Soul Retraction. The energy of Soul Retraction was capable of drawing out the souls of the deceased, damaged souls, souls, heroic souls, every single soul that was drawn out would be refined into pure soul energy, and it could be utilized to nurture and cultivate the strength of one's soul. Soul Retraction was an even more overbearing force. In battle, it was like holding onto shackles, and it was capable of forcefully restraining the soul of one's opponent. Most miraculous of it all was that the soul retraction Tao wasn't a secret technique, but a grand Tao law. After one cultivated and grasped it, one could transform it into a part of one's own cultivation. In this way, this energy could be utilized in various combat techniques. After he understood all of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but exclaim with admiration in his heart. What a soul retraction Tao! I really wonder how terrifying the netherworld was in the last era to actually be able to possess such a mysterious and overbearing energy of the Grand Tao. At the same time, Lin Sun also realized that this Tao was probably inextricably linked to the gates of hell. No matter whether it was soul retraction or soul retraction, it was all for the sake of bringing them to the gates of hell for the sake of trial and judgment, and then the 6 paths of hell would deal with them. Lin Sun couldn't help but be slightly curious. There are 9 netherworld Tao markings, and one of them is the soul retraction Tao. Then what are the other 8? Unfortunately, these 8 netherworld Tao markings weren't complete, and if he wanted to understand the mysteries within, he could only slowly gather energy to explore them. Let's go quickly, Green Sparrow urged. It could tell at a glance that Lin Sun must have obtained a great harvest, and this made its heart itch. However, it was also clear that Lin Sun would never reveal it. Lin Sun nodded, and secretly instructed Greenwood Taoist Physique to start comprehending the soul retraction Tao. Only then did he stride forward. After passing through the gates of hell, Lin Sun walked with extreme caution on the rest of the way, for fear that a bolt of animal true thunder would fall and strike him. After advancing for less than 1.5 kilometers, a netherworld general suddenly led a group of netherworld soldiers out of the rolling black fog, and they charged towards Lin Sun. How could Lin Sun be polite? He leaped up, and in a flash, he killed all the ferocious creatures, and easily obtained another underworld pearl. However, when Lin Sun was just about to size up the changes of the 9 netherworld Tao markings, suddenly, a blood-red thunderbolt appeared soundlessly, and it tore through the void and struck towards Lin Sun. From the beginning to the end, it didn't make a single sound. Even its speed was unbelievably fast. Caught off guard, Lin Sun could only use the abyssal sword cauldron to meet it head-on. Bang! The abyssal sword cauldron shook violently, and it emitted a rumbling sound. A blood-red thunderbolt burst out and spread, and it shook Lin Sun's figure to the point that he staggered back, and his chi and blood surged. He couldn't help but be shocked. This thunderbolt was too powerful. This kind of power was even stronger than the 9 realms' ancestors, and it was extremely strange. It appeared soundlessly and abruptly, and it was impossible to guard against it. Without waiting for Lin Sun to have a chance to think, the black fog once again silently flashed out bolts of thunderbolts that glowed with a demonic blood-red light. P.S. Additional updates are sent. It's the end of the month. Kids can see if there are any monthly tickets left. Chapter 25-24. A small mistake was corrected. The Ghost General in the previous update should be Yama. 1, 10, 50 more and more blood-red thunderbolts appeared silently. Some were as thick as pythons and some were as thin as swords, but none of them made any sound or breath. It was extremely weird. Lin Sun was horrified and ran away at once. Bang! 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 The abyssal sword cauldron, which was defending Lin Sun, was hit by a giant hammer again and again, producing a violent roar. Lin Sun was so shocked that he almost coughed up blood. His face changed. Without any hesitation, he ran with all his strength. Looking from afar, the dense blood-red thunderbolts were chasing after Lin Sun like sharks smelling blood. The abyssal sword cauldron was constantly bursting with dazzling electric arcs. After a while, the blood-red thunderbolts in the black mist finally disappeared. Lin Sun's face was a little pale, and his eyes were full of solemnity. He had a feeling of surviving a disaster. The power of the blood-red thunderbolts was so mysterious and terrible. This is Azura Bloody Thunder, one of the 6 lords of Thunder. If you are shrouded and besieged by it, even the 9th realm ancestors will suffer. Cyan Sparrow had a strange look in her eyes, however. As far as I know, Azura Bloody Thunder has only appeared a few times in the past countless years. No one has ever encountered it in tens of thousands of years. Who would have thought that you would encounter it, so I'm quite lucky. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Cyan Sparrow sneered, I'm afraid only unlucky guys like you will think so. Lin Sun also laughed. At least, others have no chance to see what Azura Bloody Thunder is. For me, this trip is worthwhile. Do you want to see the animal True Thunder? Cyan Sparrow said maliciously. Lin Sun's face darkened and he shook his head decisively. Then, he continued to walk for about 7 miles and finally saw the broken tablet mentioned by Cyan Sparrow. On one side of the road to the underworld, there was a 3-foot-high broken tablet. It was as black as ink and full of mottled traces of time. In the center of the tablet, 2 strange inscriptions, Yama, could be vaguely seen. Lin Sun said, The mysterious forbidden area is deep on the side of this broken tablet? Qing Ke nodded and said, Do you really plan to go there? There's no harm in giving it a try. If things go south, I'll just run away immediately. Lin Sun's black eyes flickered. Presently, his strongest trump card was the passing restriction divine ability, but he would absolutely not utilize it unless it was a matter of life and death. If someone were to notice it, it would definitely lead to an unpredictable disaster. After all, the forbidden death divine ability came from the inborn ability of abyss-devouring universe, and there were quite a number of people in the eternal true world who knew about this inborn ability. Once it was seen by others and leaked out, the Luo family would come looking for them immediately. Although his other trump cards were powerful, none of them could threaten the One Dao Ancestor's trump card. This inevitably made Lin Sun feel a sense of crisis. He was sure that a terrifying existence like the One Dao Ancestor would appear in the Great Thousand Battles domain. So, if he was able to gather some Nirvana Flames of Order, then it would be equivalent to possessing a trump card that could deter the Dao Ancestor. This was the reason why Lin Sun planned to explore it. Then you have to be careful. Qing Ke's voice also became serious. There were many mysterious forbidden areas in the Great Thousand Battles domain. Since ancient times, very few people dared to enter this mysterious forbidden area. Lin Sun nodded and operated his cultivation to its peak state. Then, he took out the abyssal sword cauldron and walked towards the side of the Yama King's tablet. The world here was completely filled with black fog. It was silent, and even the sound of the wind stopped. Even if Lin Sun used the third eye to explore, he could only see the scene within a range of thousands of feet. As he gradually went deeper, an indescribable feeling of oppression and throbbing surged through his body, causing his muscles to tense up. It seemed as if a lethal and ferocious being was hidden within the depths of the pitch-black mist. Lin Sun's expression also became solemn. He walked forward step by step, not daring to rush recklessly. The dim purple sun quietly submerged in the clouds. Unknowingly, a scarlet blood moon quietly hung under the sky filled with black fog, emitting a demonic blood light. Lin Sun looked up at the scarlet blood moon and felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. Suddenly, whoosh whoosh whoosh, numerous black dots suddenly surged into appearance in the pitch-black sky, and they converged densely beneath the blood-red moon. In the time of a few breaths, no less than 1,000 had converged here. Upon closer inspection, they were actually ferocious ghosts with ghastly pale faces and crimson eyes that were condensed from the black mist. In the center, a giant blood-colored skull floated. The skeleton was crystalline and snow-white, and it was large like a hill. Its teeth were sharp like numerous blades that stood on end, whereas 2 balls of green and glossy ghost flames burned where its eyes should be, and the flames shot into the sky and dyed the sky in a ghastly green glow. As soon as this enormous blood-red skull appeared beneath the sky, over 1,000 blood-robed ghosts kowtowed successively and prostrated themselves in worship. All of them emanated waves of obscure and sharp hee-hee sounds that surged through the heavens and the earth, and it was extremely shocking. Ghosts worshipping the moon. Lin Sun's expression became unprecedentedly solemn. This strange and gloomy scene even made him have the impulse to turn around and leave. Ghosts worshipping the moon. This is a great omen. Cyan Sparrow's voice transmission also revealed a sense of horror. It was rumored that in the netherworld of the last era, when ghosts worshipped the moon, it often meant that a ghost emperor was about to be born. This was an extremely terrible omen. When a ghost emperor appeared, it meant that a great disaster would occur in the netherworld. This was like a kind of omen. It had been spread in the netherworld since ancient times, and there was a saying that when a ghost emperor appeared, disaster would come. Bang! 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 In the sky, numerous strands of jade-green ghost flames surged into appearance on the bodies of the 1,000+ spirits, and they incinerated themselves. Their entire bodies dispersed and transformed into strands of abundant netherworld energy that surged into the mouth of the enormous skull at the center. It felt like they were sacrificing their own strength to the skull. At the same time, a thick blood-colored pillar of light surged out from the blood-colored moon in the sky and poured into the giant skeleton. In just a moment, the entire heavens and the earth were surging with the blood-colored netherworld energy that surged like tempestuous waves, and the center of the energy was the skull. It was devouring this power and was undergoing a shocking transformation. Go! Cyan Sparrow reminded quickly, seeming to realize that something was wrong. Lin Sun also nodded. At this moment, a shining black and white jade book suddenly shot out from the depths of the black mist. In the blink of an eye, it shot towards the huge blood-colored skull. Clatter! The jade book released two kinds of divine lights, black and white, which were dreamy and mysterious. Seeing this, the bloody skull made a grim and cold voice. King Qinguang, the era is about to end, and the netherworld will eventually cease to exist. Why do you still stop me? Boom! A bloody light sprayed out from the skull's mouth and collided with the black and white divine lights, producing an earth-shaking roar. The black and white jade book also hummed and collapsed into a rain of light, disappearing. Silently, a vague illusory figure emerged from the depths of the black mist. He was extremely majestic, wearing a crown and a black robe. When Lin Sun looked at him, he felt that the figure's eyes seemed to be able to reflect the universe, the sun, the moon, and the stars, containing all the heavens, and developing unpredictable secrets. Just a glance made Lin Sun's divine soul produce a suffocating pressure. But after the majestic figure appeared, he didn't seem to notice Lin Sun. He just stared at the bloody skull and said indifferently, "Even if the era is about to end, I won't allow you to disturb the order of the netherworld." The bloody skull grinned grimly. "You?" The next moment, figure after figure appeared successively from the nearby black mist. Some had strange appearances, some had refined appearances, some were mighty and terrifying, some were indifferent and composed. Even though their appearances were different, their imposing auras were undoubtedly formidable to the extreme. The bloody skull seemed to be shocked and said in a hoarse voice, "Emperor Song, King Chujiang, King Bianqing, King Taishan. Well, in order to stop me from transforming, you 10 kings of hell have come together." It seemed to be a little crazy and roared, "But have you ever thought that this era has come to an end and is about to be destroyed? Even if you can stop me, you will die in the destruction of the era." The voice resounded through the world, shook the clouds in all directions, and the mist tumbled violently. Lin Sun only felt that his head was buzzing, and he almost coughed up blood. And what answered the bloody skull was the joint action of the 10 kings of hell. Then, 10 majestic figures each stood in a corner. Some were holding Taoist books, some were holding swords, some were holding flags, some were holding bronze cauldrons, and some were holding dim yellow seals. Suppress. Freeze. Bind. Trap. Confront. Kill! Divine voices roared one after another, as if the gods had issued a decree, shaking the world. Rumble! Various terrifying treasured lights of the great Tao covered the heavens and the earth, and it revealed boundless terrifying phenomena. There were purgatory of blood, 6 paths of soul suppression, river of bitterness, Permetha oblivion. For a time, Lin Sun felt a stabbing pain in his eyes, and his mind trembled as if he was abandoned by the heavens and the earth. After an unknown period of time, Lin Sun gradually came back to his senses from the blank state, and his vision gradually became clear. But when he looked at the battlefield, he noticed to his shock that the black mist was suffused, the heavens and the earth were silent, and there was no scarlet blood moon in the sky. It seemed as if everything that happened just now was like an illusion. Battlebrand Lin Sun instantly realized that the scene he saw just now wasn't an illusion, but a shocking battle that really occurred in the last era. And what he saw was the fragments of the brand left behind by this battle. When he thought of this, Lin Sun's heart became even more restless. After countless years, the last era had been destroyed a long time ago, but in this mysterious forbidden area, he'd inadvertently caught a glimpse of a terrifying and supreme battle. Even though it was merely a fragment, it was enough to show how powerful the Yama Kings of the 10 palaces who presided over the netherworld were.